It's time for MacBreak Weekly. Andy Iannacco, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell. We're all here to talk about the latest Apple news, including the new Apple HomePod with a robotic arm. But why? Jason says this is a very bad idea. Fortnite is back on the iPhone in the EU only. And the Premier League buys a lot of iPhones. We'll explain why with that and a lot more next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 935, recorded Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Sports are sport. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Apple. And today, there is news from Apple. Let me introduce Jason Snell, who'll be the first to know when Apple's event is coming up. Jason from sixcolors.com always gets an invite about this time.
I don't know, maybe next week. I don't always get an invite for the iPhone event. The iPhone event is a tough nut to crack. I have to put in some, sometimes I have to break a sweat to get into the iPhone
Really?
event. Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. It's because I think about how we all cover Apple and we're like, oh yeah, the iPhone is big, obviously, and then the Mac and the iPad and all that. The truth is, it's like iPhone and then everything else is tiny, right? Like the iPhone matters so much to so many people, and in terms of the media event, international media, they invite people from all over the world. There's a lot of TV. It's a lot of
That's
press.
The thing, right?
And this, the Steve Jobs Theater is the size that it is. So that one's a much tougher ticket than any other Apple event. We
saw a fake invite that said September 10th, but and that is your predicted date, but we still have no real invite.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a week earlier or later, but that seems to be the most likely because there's as Alex pointed out last week, actually, it's a Labor Day holiday on September 2nd, which means that if they're doing a physical setup of a space, they would have to be paying people holiday wages basically to work on the holiday. And I mean, Apple's good for it; they'll do it if they want to. But I think not they've done it the day after a holiday before. I think they prefer not to, and so the 10th seems reasonable. They could do the 17th as well, but wild card, maybe the 4th, but I don't know. I think 10th is by far the most likely date, in which case we would probably hear next week.
And if Apple's listening, I'd really prefer the 17th. I'm out of town on the 10th, and
that's Alex Lindsay.
I know.
OfficeHours.com. He's busy on the 10th. Okay.
I'm busy, Apple. I need you to move it to the.
Can we slide that back?
Andy Iannacco's also here. WGBH in Boston. What day would you like it to be, Mr.
I could really care less. I've got more on my mind about this technology industry than Apple. Apple, again, you're flashy, but there's Qualcomm, there's Microsoft, there's Huawei. Oh, I know you know about Huawei. What I'm saying, Apple, is that I'm covering a lot of things. We'll try to squeeze you in.
That's the best way to approach it. Make them want you and your Dr. Pepper. Okay, so we don't have any iPhone news. We have lots of pictures and rumors and dumb stuff like that, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about. Although I understand the English Premier League, the English Football League, is buying a ton of iPhones. Why, you might ask?
VAR. VAR is the answer.
Yes, they're going to start using it instead of their video-assisted referee technology for offsides. Now, as our official soccer fan, Jason Snell.
Yes, thank you.
Please explain.
Big soccer fan. Yeah, VAR is instant replay for those who are Americans who don't know what soccer is as a sport or anything. It's instant
Premier
replay,
League is the top English league.
And it is the number one. It's the top English league. It's the top league, basically, in the world. And the most money. And your Manchester Cities and your Arsenals and your Chelseas are in that league, and they are changing. I mean, this is not unreasonable. This tech is changing so fast. So, for example, Major League Baseball switched this year from their old technology company to Hawkeye, which was made famous mostly from doing tennis stuff. So these are all these companies that have different camera setups, and then there's central processing that does a lot of computational photography, and from that you can determine exactly where everybody was and where every object was on the field to play at any minute. So apparently what the Premier League has done is invested in like thousands maybe of iPhones that can shoot using an app. They're shooting at like I forget 200 frames a second. It's actually a high frame rate that's required because they said that one of the problems with determining something like offsides, which is where are all the players when the ball is kicked, that the kick happened between 2 frames, so they didn't actually know, which is like
Lord.
With people moving fast.
So this is
could
all
be an
about
issue.
a very difficult, notoriously difficult thing to ref, which is offsides.
Yeah. I mean, there's goal detection stuff too, but they've pretty much got that set. It's does the ball cross the goal or not. But
that
offsides
hard.
is hard.
It's a ball.
The rule
It's
is
a goal.
complicated. It's a little like a lot of these sports where the rule is simple until our ability to measure reality gets precise, at which point the rule gets super complicated. So offsides in soccer, basically the rule is if you kick it to somebody and they're the last person between them and the goalie and there's no defender in front of them, it's illegal. And that's to keep soccer from turning into a game of long passes. You need to kind of like take the ball up yourself. That there's reasons for it. But once you start getting the video replays, the HD video replays, and you can see, oh, well, that finger, was the finger too far out? Was the shoulder slightly 1 inch too far out? And it goes from being kind of a, the ref missed the call and now we've corrected it. You get into this complexity of like inches in fractions of a second. And I could make an argument that you need to actually change your rule at that point to make it a little less ticky-tack, because it shouldn't, that level of specificity probably shouldn't matter, but it does matter for now. And they've got all the money, so they bought a lot of iPhones and they built a new, used a partner to build this new tool where they're looking at those moments at 200 frames a second from all sorts of different angles, which allows them to build basically a 3D model of the field and determine after the fact if it was offside or not. Or my least favorite thing about soccer, which is the famous goal, yay, despite all appearances, nothing happened.
In fact, that happened, I'm told by the club, that in the Euros this year, when a goal was taken back because one little piece of a toe was offside. That's got to be frustrating. But then all of soccer is frustrating to us Americans.
Well, and it's hard because you get into, especially with fouls and everything else. I mean, soccer to a fair degree. And also once you start putting all these cameras out, like the problem with football, for instance, American football, is that about 8 people are fouling every play, every single play. Like 8 people are breaking the law, and it's like, but are they going 55 miles an hour or 56 or 58 or 60? And it's a very soft, but as soon as you start having all these cameras, it gets hard to figure out how it does feel like you're gonna have to change a lot of the rules at some point because, for instance, in football, like, half the line is holding every single play. And then it's just like, how much are they holding?
And now we know, I mean, it's like with baseball balls and strikes. Now, when we know, you have to do something about it because we know. Whereas before it was sort of like just, don't worry about it. This is the way it works. The one that for me is the baseball rule about somebody sliding into second base and they put the tag on, but they beat the tag. And then as they hit the base, their foot comes off by like an inch and then bounces back down. And they say, oh, well, you were out because for a fraction of a second, your foot wasn't actually on the base. No. And that's what I mean when I say some of these rules probably just need to be like, well, once you touch it, if you're still kind of over it, it shouldn't matter, but the rules haven't caught up with the technology. And once we see it, we have to do something about it.
It's actually we need to relax the precision to the accuracy.
Yeah.
Like it's just so like
a slide rule is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well,
you can't go 8 to 0.8 digits.
Yeah.
You got
with baseball. I mean, it's a silly thing to say that there should be a hover rule where after you touch and are safe, if you hover over the bag. I mean, that seems dumb. It's actually common sense. That's always how it was called before, but technically not accurate. And so now you end up with these kind of like weird, and the offsides rule in soccer is very similar.
How do Premier League fans feel about all this? Because I know baseball fans have, as you just described it, very mixed feelings.
I'd say it's the same deal. It's the same thing. I mean, sports is sports, even across cultures. So I think there are people who love VAR
it's
and people who hate
it. UK,
sport.
So let's make it. Sports is not. Sports is sport,
and it's football and not soccer in the UK as well. But,
other than that,
but no, you've got your traditionalists who are like, oh, this is terrible. But you also have a lot of fans who say, I don't like the pauses. I don't like them drawing the little TV and then saying, I'm going to go look at this on the screen. And NFL fans know what I'm talking about. There was always that thing where they're like, oh, let's go over and look under the hood and see what the score. And you'd be frustrated by it, but those fans are also frustrated by missed calls, right? You're also frustrated when somebody calls somebody
safe. blow your lid and scream at the TV.
Well, the hard part is that now
they kill
now
the
there's
ump and all that, and that's the fun part of any sport.
But now all the fun has been taken out because everyone's betting. You know, so
can't
everyone's
kill
got
it.
there's all these
It's also
bets, and
gambling.
so
Gambling
took all the fun out of football.
Yeah.
Greg Scott on our Twitch says tech officiating is ruining sports, hockey, baseball, and now.
That is definitely representing one kind of fan. But then there are other fans who will say, well, wait a second, if the World Series is determined because an umpire missed a called strike, and so there's a balance to be struck, and I think all the leagues are kind of working on it. And I think the ideal is transparency. And I don't mean like we all know about it. I mean, if the side judge, if the assistant, I guess it's called the referee's assistant in soccer, has a little thing in their pocket and it buzzes and it knows immediately that they're offsides and they raise the flag, or it knows immediately that they're not and they lower the flag, and we don't need to know about the fact that a computer was involved, I think everybody would be fine with it. The problem is when it gets this, we're living in an era where we can't get instantaneous calls. And in most sports, in tennis, they do it now. At the US Open, every single call is made by a computer and they play a voice of somebody saying in or out, but it's actually all being done by the computer system. So when you get to that point, it doesn't matter anymore. But right now, the tech is intervening in the flow of the sport. And I think that most people don't like that. And I don't particularly like it either. I'd like it to be just natural. I just like are they safe or are they out? Are they offside or not? And we continue to play. And we know now that it's not going to be obviously wrong anymore, which was kind of why we went down this path to begin with.
But it works if it adds a new if it adds a new trick to the game, if it adds a new part of the strategy, which is like, okay, that was a botched call, I am definitely going to have them review this, or this was close enough that maybe we'll get lucky, but I only get one of those per game. And do I want to use it on something where I want to get lucky, or do I want to wait until like the eighth inning where there's an obvious blown call that will decide the game? And so long as there's like penalties for like overusing this, because otherwise this becomes like who whines best wins.
So this new system in getting back to the iPhone, this new system in the Premier League is called Dragon, from a company called Genius.
Branding.
Yeah. This, according to Wired, will use 28 iPhones, at least to start, at every stadium. It's not out yet, by the way. It'll be later this season. Some stadiums, more cameras, uses the iPhone 14 and newer, housed in custom waterproof cases with cooling fans connected to a power source. The team designed mounts that hold up to 4 iPhones clumped together. And this gives them the ability to track between 7,000 to 10,000 points on every player at all times.
Yeah. And I bet 100% that one of the purposes of that case is to obscure the fact that that's an iPhone. because like, that like, even if like this technology gets someone dead to rights and they lose a vital point, they're going to be blaming the logo on the back of the device that fingered them. They're not going to be blaming like justice about this.
Also, the cooling is super important, because if you're shooting 200 frames per second constantly, that phone is going to overheat so fast.
Yeah. Is that so? The iPhone's capable of that? Is that just the slow mo?
I think that's the slow mo.
It's interesting because I thought that the slow mo was 240 frames a second. So it's interesting that it's 200.
They may, I mean, depending on, I don't know the details of if they've scaled that down.
The initial system will be capped at 100 frames a second to balance latency, accuracy, and costs.
Right, because they got to stream it and they got to keep it running and all of that. But it's an interesting idea. And the other thing is those data points. I mean, sports is being transformed by the fact that we can monitor all those points on the body, and we can do things like there are those stats. Like we know how far a player has run during a match. We know like lots of details, and this is true with all these sports. We know everything like ergonomically about where they are during every play, and then you can generate. Coaches are informed by that. Fans can be informed by that. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. I do agree with Andy that what we've seen is that a lot of this stuff ends up being part of the theater, and that maybe in the end, although I kind of don't mind transparency, the theater of it might be another way to go. Major League Baseball, when they do their balls and strikes thing, they could introduce an automated balls and strike system, but they're not going to. They're going to have an appeal system with a limited set of appeals. And the idea there is you have the ability to stop the most egregious things from happening, but it's not going to be part of the game from pitch to pitch. And I think that, offsides is really, when you win 1-0 a lot of the time, or 2-1, right? When it's one goal makes the difference. It does, it is kind of important to get it right, and it doesn't happen that often. And I can see why in soccer, especially, it's the difference between winning or losing, or winning or tying on a single call of a few inches.
Okay. Sport is sports.
Sport.
Or sports is sport.
Sport are sports.
Sport are sport. Let's see, what else? I think a lot of creatives very happy about Procreate taking a stand against AI. So many drawing apps now have added AI generative features. You can't use a Microsoft app without some sort of generative AI. Procreate on its website said, even though machine learning is a compelling technology with a lot of merit, we ain't gonna use it. James Kuda, who is aptly named, released a strong statement in a video posted to X on Monday. We're never going there. Creativity is made, not generated.
Yeah, I mean, this was also really, really good. Oh, were you? Sorry.
You've been asking us about AI.
I
usually
like
don't
his
like it
accent.
in front of the camera. I prefer that our products speak for themselves. I really fucking hate generative AI.
Thank you for
I don't
bleeping
like what's
yourself.
happening in the industry, and I don't like what it's doing to artists. We're not going to be introducing any generative AI into our products. Our products are always designed and developed.
A lot of praise from the creative community about this one. Andy, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were playing something. Yeah, I like this. I mean, it's rather than just sort of hang back and make a decision, you may as well fly the flag for a certain point of view. And this is definitely a very hardline point of view. They've made their intentions very, very clearly. And it's also very good marketing because all their competition is really, really tripping over their own heels with generative AI, particularly Adobe, who just can't even add a simple necessary piece of legalese without making people think that, oh, well, they're going to be stealing all of our stuff and building robots that replace us. That said, that's not the only point of view. I think that we need to think about generative AI as a tool in the hands of a human creative intelligence, that there are lots of people who are worthy of, being paid $500, $800, $2,000 for an illustration for a magazine. However, there's also a need for, look, I don't have $1,000. I just want a piece of art that's relevant to this blog post that I'm writing. I don't want the generative art tool to be exploiting actual artists. I want it to be based on, I want it to be trained on images that are either in the public domain, not free on the web, but in the public domain, or for which they've paid licenses. But given that, yeah, I want a tool so that I can give a quick thumbnail sketch of what I want, and then iteratively figure out how to make that through a generative AI.
Yeah,
so
well,
long as it's not
you have choice. I mean, Adobe is going all in on AI, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's smart of Procreate to say, but we're just a drawing tool. We're not going to use. I guess you could always.
Yeah, again, it's a really good to make, if you have that point of view, to use that point of view and make it so that you don't seem like, hey, we're falling behind. Oh my God, Procreate used to be so good, but now, gosh, I mean, I had this problem where it was a great image, but I just needed to remove something and fill in the background. It can't even do that. What's up, Procreate? But it's saying, no, we've made from our principles, we've made a principled stance that we are intellectually not putting those features in. Again, so long as it's also really good marketing. It'll attract and hold on to the audience that they can best serve. Again, so long as the only thing I would be worried about is demonization of generative AI, because I don't think that's necessary. And I think that if you choose to demonize generative AI, you're basically saying that it's like there was a generation that was like, I can't believe there are people who are actually using markers. The only way to draw a comic strip is with a hard steel nib that you dip in the ink. If you don't understand how to use these tools, you're not a real artist. And so, well, I think in 5 or 10 years from now, it will be integrated enough that it will be like just like those magic brushes that we have on the iPad that can take a stroke and smooth it out and make it into a beautiful, lively line with pressure and a start and an end. I think that that's the sort of thing we're going to see in 5 or 10 years, and we shouldn't be demonizing that kind of development.
Fair enough. Point well taken.
I mean, it's both kinds, right? It's that's the truth of it is, here I am trying to advocate for nuance, but it's absolutely the case that there are people out there who look at AI and say AI is the cure for needing creative people. And that's wrong and bad. It is also true, though, that there are a lot of creative people who look at the AI stuff and say there is stuff in here that allows me to be more creative, that allows me to do things even as simple as like basic like select subject in Adobe Photoshop, right? Like the little tiny things that you could do, but it wasn't your creative effort. You're doing something like, generating a sky replacement for a photograph, and you used to have to do that manually, and now there's a tool that uses some machine learning that does it. And it's like, is that part of your creative charter to build that? It's not really an important part of your job, but it has to be done. And saving them time or giving them a creative prompt. A friend of mine who's a novelist said that he has GPT chats about where he's going with his novel. And he said, they're not writing the novel for me. They're not even plotting the novel for me, but he's got a GPT that knows the entire contents of his existing novel, so he can use it for reference. He can say, where is this character? What did they do? And then he can also say, if this was happen, what do you think might happen next? And sort of see. And what he says is, again, the answers don't tell him what to write, but the answers spark creativity in himself. And he goes, no, wait a second, that's interesting. And then he follows it down the path. So again, it's just a tool. It can be used for good and bad, but I do understand where Procreate is coming from in the sense that there are people out there saying this solves creativity, and that's not what it is. That's not how we should think of it.
Yeah, and I think that Procreate, their business is to sell to people who are drawing. Like that's they're Photoshop is a much more like I'm probably my number one use of Photoshop is generative fill. Like I just get rid of this, move this over, add more thing. I extend shots all the time for things because to me it's just like most of what I do is not. I mean, it's creative, but it's really, I have assets that I'm building for something that I'm working on, and I just need this to get done, and I would never hire someone to do what I'm doing there. I just need this to be a little wider, and it works really great. But I think that Procreate's main business is people who do the drawing part, and they're drawing it. And I think that, I always find that with AI, the people who feel like they have just tons and tons of ideas and can't get them out because they don't know how to do the thing, they love AI. The people who do the thing don't love AI. So, and Procreate's business are the people who do the thing. And so I think it's a relatively safe thing for him to do for his vertical.
It is
to take
right
a stand
now.
and go down that path.
You think it's a mistake in the long run?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I think that I think it's going to be harder to get exactly what people want out of AI. I mean, we see a lot of things that look amazing, but what people don't understand around shooting a movie or building an image, it's the precision of control that you have when you have great people doing it, that they're doing something that is very hard to do. AI doesn't do that very well, to be honest. Like it does a beautiful image, but not exactly what you want. It's kind of like, well, it's pretty close. So like, it's a really great replacement for stock photography because stock photography isn't really what you wanted. It's kind of like the idea of what you thought you would want. So I would not want to be in the stock photography business unless you're doing what Getty's doing, which Getty is training AI with all of their images, and they have a back end that's going to go back to the photographer so that you can go to Getty and just ask for stuff. So that's going to be more valid, I think, in that area. I don't know if the photographers will make enough money to survive doing that. So there are areas that are problematic, but I think that when you talk about getting just the right shot or just the right script or just the right those things, I haven't seen. I don't think AI will get there as fast as we think. There's not that many humans that can do it well. And so they with all millions of people doing it and learning it, there's not that many great writers, and there's not that many great directors, and there's not that many great camera people, and it's a very limited number, and that's with people power. Yeah. And I think it'll take. Now there are many things that I think AI will fill in that can customize the experience. I talked, I think, last week about the idea that AI can customized reading for kids in a way that a teacher could never do at scale, and the kids, it can dance with what they know and keep on making things harder and now the teacher still needed when it can't answer the question or when the kids need to fill it in. But I think that there are places where it makes sense, but I don't think it's going to be as all encompassing as people think anytime soon.
Yeah. It's going to have a role. We don't know what that role is. So long as we don't embrace it as the new messiah for creativity or lambast it as the new devil that we must shun, I think that we're gonna have a fun time navigating it. Because again, people think of generative AI as doing your homework for you. Sometimes it really is just an empowering technology that will allow you to do just, again, simple things like, I can't draw an entire downtown cityscape. I want that as a background for this movie I'm doing or this little project I'm doing. What I can do is I can go into my kitchen pantry, take out a whole bunch of boxes, line them up on my kitchen table, and here's how I want the street to go. Here's the arrangements of the building, and then simply tell the generative AI, turn this into a street scene. I specifically want the Cheerios box to be like a shiny office building. I definitely want the cracker box to be kind of an old-timey post office, small and snug. And then it will give you something that is at least 80% what you want, which you can then proceed to go and complete that you couldn't do before. But the last thing is that, and this is really, really uncomfortable as a creative professional, generative AI, again, generate the image, generate the text. It is really, really good at creating something that's mediocre, that doesn't really have a particular style or point of view. That's its greatest limitation. The problem is that it is the advancement of these technologies is shining way too bright a spotlight on how many people are okay with mediocre stuff that has no creative point of view. That's just fine. If someone is needs a user manual, yeah, you could pay this person $20,000 to write a beautiful user manual that will enhance the use of your product and make you a star amongst your consumers. Or for $800, you could get a couple of people to basically spit one out using generative AI, and it will be okay. It will be what people expect from a user manual, or it will be what they expect from a briefing paper.
There's a lot of user manuals that I've gotten from overseas that I would be really happy with just okay. I mean, they're barely readable, and they've got, and so I think that that's where AI can really, make it better. And, I think I was driving most of last week to Arizona and back with my kids, and we were listening to Matilda Mann, who's a British singer-songwriter. And my daughter really likes Matilda Mann. And I said, well, what can you tell me more about this artist? I really like it. And we started Googling, and we could not find any place there was a lot of information about her. So we just asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT wrote 4 perfect, I don't know if it's perfectly accurate, but it sure feels accurate when you look at it. And we started Googling some of that stuff, and it looked good. But it was and it seemed to encompass everything that my daughter knew about the artist. And more, and we did that with a couple different artists, and it was just, I think I was stunned by how well it just kind of compacted all the information that was available of that person into something that was readable, and I think that that's where it does really well. I think actually producing end product is not something that I've seen it do much yet. Yeah, and it will get better at it, but I'm not clear. That top 1%, like what we watch now on Apple TV or Hulu or whatever, is at such a high level. The production level is so high that I think that, we're used to looking at something that I don't think AI is going to get to not nearly as fast as people think it will.
Yeah. If you use Microsoft Office on your Mac, you might want to know about this. Cisco Talos, which is their security arm, uncovered security vulnerabilities, 8 vulnerabilities in Word, Outlook, Excel, OneNote, and Teams. According to Talos, these vulnerabilities allow attackers to inject malicious code into the apps, exploiting permissions and entitlements granted by the user. I think maybe the most serious concern is that attackers could access your microphone, your camera, record audio or video. That seems pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, and this is
It's
part of what drives people crazy about Apple constantly asking for permission. But this is what Apple's saying, like, we can't trust anybody to get this right. So we're going to make sure it's really hard for you to turn your camera on.
Microsoft has acknowledged the vulnerabilities, says they're low risk. This is Microsoft's stock answer, by the way, to lately. Some apps like Teams, OneNote, and Teams helper apps have been modified to remove the entitlement, which, to do video. com.apple.security.cs.disable-library-validation. That's the name of the entitlement.
Yeah.
By removing that, you're kind of reducing the attack surface. Word, Excel, Outlook, and PowerPoint still use it. And Microsoft has, this is from a story in Apple Insider, reportedly declined to fix the issues because the company's apps need to allow loading of unsigned libraries to support plugins. Microsoft's always done things differently on Mac. Maybe this is the wrong time to do that.
Yeah. The problem isn't, fortunately, this isn't like they found a problem with Apple's permission system. What they found is that there is a possibility that you could use the fact that if the user has given Microsoft Word permission to access the camera, permission to access your downloads folder, all this sort of stuff, this malicious code could then sort of like use that permission that Microsoft Word has to do something that you didn't actually approve of. Yeah, it hasn't been found in the field. It hasn't been found to actually be actionable. Again, and Microsoft says that it would require a lot. It's not the sort of thing where you open a message from an iMessage and suddenly people can access your camera and your microphone. However, it is weird. It does make you wonder exactly how dependent Microsoft is on those plugins, on those unsigned plugins, that they are not even willing to close this hole just on principle. And here is the problem of using a platform that has to work on every computer for every use case everywhere in the world. Microsoft Word, there's 99% of the features are things that you have nothing to do with. However, 5% of those features are so important to a small percentage that they have to stay in there and they have to keep working, even if they make that app vulnerable on a Mac. But Microsoft can't just hand wave this way. You'd want to hear them say something more specific than, yeah, we're not too worried about it. Like, oh, okay, well then.
I think we need to go back to the last best Microsoft Word, which was definitely 5.1.
The last best Microsoft Word was WordPerfect. I think it was WordPerfect 6 was the one I
Mr. Fancy Pants when doesn't want to use WordStar.
5.1. When they went from 5.1 to 6, it was over for me.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody, we talked about this on Twig last Wednesday, has released WordStar, re-released WordStar, which is kind of basically abandonware, right? And they've re-released
1992,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that if you want to download it, it requires DOS. I suppose you could run it nicely in an emulator on a Mac.
Well, the entire package. This is what it's hysterically. It's something I really, really sympathize with as a fellow writer, because once you have a writing tool you really love and you and the writing tool have sort of grown together so that it's like an extension of your creativity, you want to keep using it and you will reject everything else. But the argument that the fans of WordStar make is that I just love the simplicity. It's so simple. They're so the new word processors, they're so complicated. I like how simple WordStar is. And then like, well, how do you run it? Okay, well, here's a 700 megabyte app package. First, you have to run an emulator, and then you have to install that going. Then you have to install find this old version of WordStar, and then once you're finished, here's the special app you need to do to get it outside of the DOSBox workspace, and then to transmogrify it into something that's like, okay, I mean. It's a sum zero sort of lateral move of effort, but at least you get to use like the editing environment you like to use, and that's the most important thing.
And we should point out, doesn't have the same flaws that Word does.
Exactly.
It will not take over your camera. All right, let me take over your show for just a minute for a commercial, and we'll get back with more with our MacBreak Weekly team, Andy Yanako from GBH in Boston. When's your next GBH appearance?
Not next week, but the week after on Thursday, 12:30.
Okay, great. Jason Snell, sixcolors.com. Great to see you. Jason, we'll talk about your interview with Zach Gage in a little bit. That was very cool. Very cool. And from officehours.global, Mr. Alex Lindsay, for whom I can thank this much of the setup here in the attic. Appreciate your
Looking good. It's looking good.
Your consultation. We brought our gaffer in, Paul, yesterday, and he's going to relight. In fact, I apologize. I started the show a little yellow because I forgot to reset the lights. But we're going to relight. We're also going to paint this this medallion behind me because it kind of looks like one of those Greek Orthodox halos right now. And that's not.
Just moved it up just a little bit.
It also looks like a prescription pill. It looks like a Tums. Looks like you're sponsored by Tums.
I think if you just moved it up just another like 2 or 3 inches and then gave it a gold edge, it would really have the whole halo effect.
I have been considering that. Yeah. Anyway, great to have you all. We're in the attic, as you could tell, and very happily so in the attic. But one thing that has not changed for Twit in almost 2 decades now. This episode of MacBreak Weekly is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com. How many years have you heard me say that? For over 20 years, Cashfly has held the track record for high-performing, ultra-reliable content delivery, serving over 5,000 companies in over 80 countries. We're one of them. We've been using Cashfly since, well, you may remember in the early days of Twit, you could download it from a variety of places. BitTorrent, AOL Radio, I kid you not. But thank goodness Matt Levine called me and said, I can help. And we've been with Cash. He was one of the founders. We've been with Cashfly ever since. We love the lag-free video loading, the hyper-fast downloads, the friction-free site interaction. Cashfly is the only CDN built for throughput with ultra-low latency video streaming that could deliver video to over 1 million concurrent users with latency under a second. Yes, under 1 second. Lightning fast gaming delivers downloads faster, 0 lag, glitches, or outages. Mobile content optimization offers automatic and simple image optimization. That's really cool. Your site loads faster no matter what size screen you're on or your user's on. And the thing we really appreciate about Cashfly, they were very flexible with us because we didn't, our streaming is very spiky. It's up and down. And Cashfly was very flexible. You can have month-to-month billing as long as you need it. And then once you know what you're going to want, you can get discounts for fixed terms. The point is you can design your own contract when you switch to Cashfly. Cashfly delivers rich media content up to 158% faster than other major CDNs and allows you to shield your site content in their cloud. And we do that, by the way, which means no more cache misses, 100% cache hit ratio. With Cashfly's elite managed packages, you're going to get the VIP treatment too, and I can vouch for that. Your dedicated account manager will be with you from day one, ensuring a smooth implementation and reliable 24/7 support when you need it. So I want you to check it out. Learn how you can get your first month free at cashfly.com/twit. Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com/twit. Thank you so much, Cashfly, for everything you do for us. Back to the show. So who is Zach Gage?
I think Zach Gage is one of the world's foremost game designers, indie game designers. He thinks about this a lot. He has made some of the very best of indie iPhone games like Spell Tower and Really Bad Chess and Pilot Poker and Good Sudoku. And he recently started, and it's owned by Hearst now, a startup called Puzzmo that is a web-based puzzle bundle. So if you're a Hearst newspaper subscriber, you can sign up for
this
cheap,
is so cool.
Other people can do it. But it's in the same space as like the New York Times games and all of that. And it's a whole collection of games, some of them based on Zach's apps, and some of them are new. And it's like a puzzle. I mean, it's a puzzle subscription, just like the New York Times game subscription is, with a whole bunch of different games and puzzles that you can play. Which I think is really cool because, I mean, Zach, I think his games were met with a really positive reception in the Apple indie game community and then in the broader Apple community. But putting them on the web and having a partner like Hearst means that they're gonna be going out to a lot more people who've never seen what Zach and his team have done.
And you can play it for free, ad supported, right?
Yeah, there's free stuff, and then there's stuff that you need to subscribe to get. Like it's freemium, right? So like, some puzzles are premium, I think, and some things in your like user settings in your community. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a little bit of both. You can play a lot for free, and then you can do more if you pay.
Yeah, you've mentioned Zach before, and I think it's really cool. I think it's really great, very important to interview developers about their experience in the real world and so forth. Does he have any apps, though? Is he a app store guy?
I mean, yeah. all those apps.
Those are all apps. I use
Pocket
I know
Run
that.
Pool, really bad chess.
Yeah, I use Good Sudoku. I love it.
All of those are in the App Store.
Okay.
And then he's now done this website. And so we talked about, they launched a new game called Pile Up Poker, and I got a chance to talk to him for a little while and posted the edited interview on 6 Colors, and he's a really philosophical guy. So like starting with poker, the idea of like, how do you take a game that's all about betting and cash on a website where there's no cash? How do you do that? And he uses cash as money as a framing device sort of for the game, but he talked about how do you simplify it and what's good about poker. And one of his insights is you can play poker every week with a group of 4 friends, and then after a year, a random person comes in and sits down and they can play it and they can win. And that's how poker is. It's kind of a common understood thing. So they adapted it, and Pocket Run Poker, or not Pocket Run Poker, the Puzzmo poker. What is it called? I forget now. Pile Up Poker. He likes the alliteration. With like
$10 million a day.
Yeah, but it's not real. It's not real money.
I understand.
But it's like part of the flavor of it, right? But it's actually a puzzle game because you get 5 cards and you have to play 4 of them, and you have to try to create hands, 4-card hands,
fun
to the side and bottom. But
so
anyway,
it's a little Wordle. It's like Wordle poker.
Yeah. So talking about like why he does it that way and how he like one of the insights that I got from talking to him, as I said, Zach, you can only play 5 hands a day. If this was an app, you'd have to play infinitely. And what he said was, actually, I don't like that you can play it 5 times a day. I wish it was less. I wish it was 3 times. Because he said in testing it, I absolutely was up till 1 a.m. playing it endlessly, and I felt kind of empty and gross. And it's like, I don't want people to feel that way. I want them to have fun. And he told me a story about how he played a roguelike game with a friend of his, and they made a pact to only play it once a day and watch the other one do it. And what he said was he got really good over 6 months at that game because that one play a day mattered. Yeah. He was focused on it. It wasn't just mindless, it was focus. And he thinks that is, he said if he did this game as an app, he would have to have an infinite mode where you could play it forever. But what he'd really lean into is a daily challenge, because then that's the one that focuses you, and that's the one that matters. And all of these games where you can play forever can end up seeming like work. They end up being kind of like another assignment for you. I've got to tend to my games today. And that's not a thing that he really wanted. It's somebody who spent a lot of time thinking about how our human brains work with games and what makes them good and what makes them bad, and trying to give people this positive experience. Like he said, I didn't really think about it this way, but he said so much of the internet is negative interactions. It's people getting angry, or people saying, can you get a load of this guy? Or here's a video that'll make you sad. And he said the good thing about something like Wordle and everybody sharing their Wordle scores is it was more like, hey, I did a thing, and what do you think of this thing? And he says that sort of thing is good, and the internet is good at it, and he wants to facilitate making more things that do that sort of thing, because that's another way to use our brains on the internet.
$340 in Pile Up Poker. I'm rich.
That's not a good score. Not a good score, but it's a start. It's a start. Anyway, very, very thoughtful guy. And he had some thoughts about probability, and like Sid Meier has this line about how if it's 90% probability, you need to have the player win 100% of the time or they get angry. And he's like, that's completely wrong. If I tell you to flip a coin and that it's a 50-50 chance and it comes up the wrong one, you don't go, this is rigged. You don't do that. So right. Smart guy, really interesting, and glad I got to talk to him.
Nice. Love that.
So people can check out the interview. They like 6colors.com.
6colors.com.
Yeah.
Fortnite, speaking of games, is back on the iPhone. Woohoo! Don't get your hopes up. Get your hopes up if you're in the EU.
In the EU, yes.
Thank you, European Competition Commissioner. outgoing competition commissioner Margarita Vestager. Thank you. Epic has launched its game store. Anything to say? I mean,
the world has not come to an end somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it is only Europeans. I got to sign into my wired subscription. I hate Condé Nast because it's impossible to sign into your wired subscription.
And of course, as soon as it wound up in Europe, all kinds of how-to guides on here's how to get it working. The Fortnite store working in the US. It's really, really tricky. You have to have a paid app developer license. You have to be a $99 a year Apple developer in order to give your phone the entitlements you need to make it happen. And you have to ask yourself, is this really, really worth it?
Yeah. How does Tim Sweeney feel? Is he happy? Is he satisfied? No, he wants
never
more.
To both questions, no matter what the question is.
I mean, I don't think we'll know whether it's success or not for 6 to 12 months. We have to see. I mean, it's there. Some people are going to start downloading. And the question is how many people will actually use it? Number one. And number two, will they see any malware and will there be any problems? And if there are any malware problems, I'm sure Apple will tell us in an advertisement. So I think that we don't know really right now how much people are going to use it. So
and you may remember Epic sued Apple in the U.S. and lost in this case. I mean, they won a little bit, but they weren't able to force Apple to open up their app store. To an Epic app store. However, the EU's Digital Markets Act did make that happen. And Epic says it plans to eventually bring its games to Aptoid's iOS store in the US. I'm sure in European, Aptoid is a good word. And the One Store on Android, and says in a blog post, we look forward to bringing our games to other stores around the world. Tim Sweeney says, we're really excited and grateful for the European DMA law.
I mean, the reality is if someone's a really avid user of a lot of the Epic tools, then it's good. They're providing something that they can have they can lower the margin and everything else. I don't know how many average people will jump over to that, but for the folks that really want to use it, it'll lower the cost of buying and selling goods. So
this was a long battle. Remember, Apple shut down the Epic developer account in the spring, called the company verifiably untrustworthy. They were kicked off iOS. This is what started the whole lawsuit. The inquiry from the European Commission forced Apple to reinstate Epic's account, but then it didn't like the buttons. Remember, it didn't like the buttons?
Yeah.
So finally, it is there. And the store has 3 first-party games. They say they're in discussions with others. But really, the reason for the store is Fortnite, I would guess, right? That's the main point.
Yeah.
To buy and sell goods.
Yeah.
I think that's they want to be able to buy and sell virtual goods, and they don't want to pay Apple 30% to do that. So
they still have to pay the core technology fee, 50 cents a year for each install after the first million. That's right. Yes.
I think that they're appealing that in the EU. I think that they're in it right now, but I think that that's one of the things that they're complaining, and the EU is reviewing as to whether that fee can stick or not.
But who doesn't have to pay it, or at least he doesn't have to charge his users for it, is Riley Testut of AltStore, because they got a grant from Epic to that is one of their mega grants or whatever it's called. So basically it's going to cover their core technology fee for AltStore in the EU. So they're not going to charge their users an annual fee for AltStore in the EU thanks to Epic. So it's another case of Epic and Tim Sweeney sort of trying to make alternative app stores in Europe as viable as possible, even if they have to throw their own money. He's basically comping anybody in Europe who wants to use Riley Testut's alternate app store instead of his, or in addition to his. He's comping them by giving him that grant, which is that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, we've had discussions in the past about how this is, these are just like $1 trillion company and another hugely successful, multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company going at it. But the thing is, an independent developer can't go after Apple about this. It's only a company like Epic that can go after it. And if they win, they create a pretext for the smaller developers to make the choices that they feel is correct for them. So yeah, I think this is overall a pretty big win.
It'll be, again, the danger with all of these for all the stores is if any store misses the mark, Apple will bury them with it. It'll like so as more stores proliferate, every store is a risk to all the other stores if they don't figure out how to keep because the reason they're building these stores is to get around a lot of the Apple rules. They're designed to keep everything, quote unquote, safe and everything else. And so if they're not safe and then something does come out that has a PR problem, this is how Apple keeps it out of the United States, is using it against them. And so I think that they're really, and again, you can definitely expect that if you're if you go down the alternate store route, probably not going to get invited to Cupertino. so
that's fine.
It's so easy not to get invited to Cupertino. Let me tell you.
I think they'll use some of that, like 30% that they're not spending to Apple, to buy their own damn phones. That'll be just fine by them.
I just think that you're just deciding that forever you don't want to work with Apple on anything. Like you want to use their platform, but you don't want to be friends. So that's and that's totally fine. You can decide that you didn't care, and that's fine, and you're upset. But you are, as a developer, you are making that decision. Like it's Apple's not going to have a short memory.
I mean, I think a lot of them are just making the decision that there is only so much mud I am willing to eat and call ice cream. At some point, I have eaten enough mud and been forced to call it ice cream that I'm now really, really very, very well engaged into the problem of how do I get out of not eating mud and being forced to call it ice cream. And so a lot of this really is principled stuff. And I mean, it's a similar but unrelated legal operation where it's Spotify has won because of not the EU's antitrust and competitive laws, but because of a separate ruling about how Apple runs music stores. Spotify won, get this, the amazing ability to, on their app, mention that there is a special promotion going on the Spotify.com website. Okay. They still can't link to Spotify.com. If they do, they're going to be charged a 27% fee of anything that they get by people following that link. But the fact that they had to have an entire government crackdown and say, yes, you're being unfair, allow Spotify to say, by the way, if you sign up for because we're excited about signing this new artist, if you sign up with this new premium account, we will give you a 20% discount. It's like, you can't even just mention this anywhere. With Apple, every single music app, including Apple's, when you launch it, so often presenting you with something other than the music that you actually wanted to come to. They want to show you, oh, we've got these new playlists. Oh, we've got this new promotion. Oh, we've signed this new thing. Oh, check out this thing. But no, you can't have Spotify say, oh, if you go to our website, you can get 20% off on something. That required the Nuremberg trials. This is Geneva had to come in. The Hague had to get involved in order to put that text in the Spotify app. That's how hairy this situation is getting. It's weird, and I hope that Apple gets ahead of the ball, because they're going to be facing so many problems on so many fronts legally, because this is the one area of their operations where it is really hard for them to make a principled argument that they're doing something because it's best for the market and it's best for their users. They have to. This is the one place where they are AT&T, they are Microsoft. They are not the good guys.
You're watching MacBreak Weekly. We are the good guys. And we do this every Tuesday, and we're glad you're here to join us. Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, and Jason Snell. We continue on. Let's talk about the Google decision. We've been talking about that quite a bit since it came down a couple of weeks ago. The judge at Meta ruled that Google was a monopoly. And in particular, among other things, focused on the fact that Google pays something like $30 billion a year in traffic acquisition costs, $20 billion to Apple, a couple of billion to Mozilla for Firefox, and a couple of billion to Samsung, in order to be the default search engine on those platforms. The judge didn't like that. And it seems, according to Benedict Evans, this is a great piece, Competing in Search, it seems likely the judge is going to turn off the faucet for those payments as part of his judgment. The question is now what happens next? And Benedict talks about whether Apple losing that $20 billion should even continue to use Google search Should Apple create its own search engine?
Do they want to
they have
compete?
one.
Yeah.
That's one of the things Benedict says is they've been spidering for a decade.
Yeah, and you
for
see it in
Siri.
Spotlight, and you'll see it in some of their other places. They made an agreement though with Google. Part of the deal here is they could have done their own, and they felt like you might as well take the money from Google. Although I will say, I'm unclear on what the remedy is going to be. Nobody really knows, but I think it's interesting that the problem apparently is that Google is the default, and that keep in mind lots of search engines have deals with Apple. And it's a traffic-based deal. It's like an affiliate system where if you use Bing or DuckDuckGo and you do searches from the Safari bar, they pay Apple, right? Even though they're not the default, they pay Apple. So I wonder if the resolution of this might be as simple and unfulfilling as not allowing Google to be the default and making people choose, but maybe allowing Google and other search engines to continue compensating browser makers for searches done in that browser, right? It's a little bit different, right? It's like we're not paying you to be the default. We're just paying you for our cut of search. In which case, Apple and Mozilla, would keep a lot of their money from Google. It just wouldn't be the default anymore, because the truth is, it's not the placement that makes Google the number one search engine. Google's going to be the number one search engine if people choose to. And I think that's part of the problem here, and part of the fantasy is if you let people pick, they'll pick Google, right? If you choose Bing for them as the default, a lot of them will just switch it back to Google. So I don't know, but I do wonder if there's a way for Apple to ultimately hold on to a lot of this money if they stopped Google being the default, but continue to take money for the percentage of searches that go through Google.
Yeah, it's a very weird ruling. I finally finished reading it, and it's like so much of it is almost a love letter to Google. There's so many pull quotes where I'm thinking, because the judge was explicitly saying that the reason why Google is number one is because it's the best product. Not only is it the best product, but everybody thinks it's the best product. The people who want a default search engine on their phones want Google because it's the best product, and it's because the users want that as the best product. And how did it become the best product? Through anti-competitive measures? No, the judge says because they've been investing an immense amount of money since their first $100 investment in Google for 20 years, building this as the core of their entire business. The judge even went ahead and said that they continue to innovate despite the fact that in the way that the judge chose to define the market, even though they have 90% of the market, they continue to invest and innovate in this platform. And so that's why, it led to a lot of people who are actual antitrust lawyers wondering, how long is this going to stand up on appeal? This might be something where the DOJ is going to want to negotiate a way out of this. But the scary thing, though, is that with antitrust, it's not a question of, okay, the judge has found that it was improper and anti-competitive for Google to pay these $50 million for primary placement and exclusive bindings for this, that, and the other. We are going to order you to not do that anymore, and also assign a fine and a penalty. No, the point of antitrust is to restore the market to a place where anybody can compete, to basically make sure that if they think that Google has an impenetrable advantage, they are empowered, if actually ennobled, to break apart the market if they have to and put it together in a fashion where this market can be free for anybody to participate in.
I like Evans' conclusion on this, and I think it coincides nicely with what you're saying. He says, one lesson we might draw from all the previous waves of tech monopolies is that once a company has won and network effects have become self-perpetuating and insurmountable, then you don't beat that by making the same thing but slightly better and getting a judge to give you an entry point. You win by making the old thing irrelevant. Google didn't build a better PC operating system or a Win32 Office suite. Facebook didn't do better search, and Apple didn't do a better BlackBerry. Yeah. His point is the day of this kind of search index might be over anyway. that AI might solve this whole problem.
Right, which is why it's kind of important to think, how do you do, and I think you can see it in how Apple is going to structure their world knowledge part of their AI story, which is, even though they've mentioned GPT, like they haven't crowned GPT. I know I talked about this here after WWDC. It was like the least whelming. It was deeply underwhelming endorsement of a partner, right? It was like, hey, ChatGPT will be here, but we'll warn you, and we're only going to use it for these certain kind of queries, and there will be others. Not just this one. They're like, no. But I think strategically, that's Apple sort of saying, and I do wonder, and I think Ben Evans wonders this too, if that's why they're holding back a little bit on the EU for Apple Intelligence, is if they come in with a bunch of different world knowledge providers and say, take your pick and let them compete. And it's Google and it's OpenAI and maybe it's some others, Perplexity or whatever. And it's like, go to town, you pick. And maybe they've got deals with them. Apparently the GPT deal is that nobody's paying anybody right now. But it's not, here's a winner, we've picked a winner. It's, you pick and the market will sort it out. And that Apple, as somebody who at least right now doesn't seem to want to play in that game, the world knowledge game, I think that benefits them to say, let's let everybody fight this one out, and we won't pick a winner, but we'll win regardless because they all are on our platform. I think that's what they're trying.
And number one, for the Google ruling, I mean, this is one ruling. I mean, we're years away from them having to do anything. and again,
Yes.
if so, like there's probably 3 to 5 years that's still there in the current Supreme Court structure. The government probably couldn't win, but it's 3 to 5 years away, and there'll be new appointments and there'll be new things and everything else, and so it might change by then. For the Apple thing, I think Apple's plan is to win all of it by taking over, being able to answer 90% of your questions inside of their environment and letting you go to the 10% and just use anything else for that outer 10%. They don't have that right now, but I think that if they get very good at we can answer most of what you're trying to do with verified information that is not is not encumbered by a lot of copyright issues, and it is, it's probably going to be accurate most of the time, and it's private and it's on your phone and on your hardware and everything else. Apple's going to win a lot of things that way, and then we have this little release valve that's called that third thing, that little, like, you can still do it, and I think that's going to be really hard to compete with long term. For folks.
And Apple, if they just focus on whatever it is that they do with AI, it works great, and it is something that you can't imagine using your phone without. That is still a win. They don't have to win everything. Like one of the recurring themes during the Pixel 9 launch event, which was really mostly an event for Gemini for Google AI, was that we have a very much enhanced personal assistant, and it's actually shipping this week, and we're all informed by real world live information through our knowledge of Google search. And that's great. And I've had it for the past week, and there's so many things that it's really, really super good at. I was at an international food market with bins of amazing weird candy, individual wrapped candies I couldn't figure out because they're in Russian, they're in Ukrainian, they're in Portuguese. And so I just had my phone, was just having an ongoing conversation with Gemini saying, what is this? And saying, okay, this appears to be a Russian hazelnut candy with the nougat on it.
So it knew?
And it worked. After time, it worked. However, it doesn't really work the way that I want it to work as a personal assistant, because there is still like this crosstalk between what Google defines as the Google Assistant, like, hey Guillermo, set a timer for 15 minutes. Hey Guillermo, what's the weather? Hey Guillermo, remind me of this at 12:30 p.m. on Tuesday. And the stuff that the super AI can do, the AI client can do. So if I'm so much so that I've kind of reset, you can just flip a setting to say, okay, I don't want to use Gemini as my personal assistant. So instead, when I hold down the power button, I still get all the functionality that I've been getting off of the Google Assistant for the past several years. And when I want something that I want an actual like living voice to speak to work something out with, that's when I I launch the actual Gemini button. What I'm saying is that if Apple, when they release whatever they do with AI, whatever it is, it works great. I don't have to figure out that, okay, I'm going to want to switch this off at least until the next iteration of this feature comes on, they can make a really, really good play of it. They're not, and that said, remember that they're not playing this game at the same level as Google and Microsoft and other companies are. Google really wants, as the saying goes, is this a product or is this just a feature? Apple right now seems to be pursuing AI as a feature, whereas Google is really doing it as a full end-to-end product. But that, again, that's another advantage for people who want an iPhone that seems smarter. So long as Apple's putting all of its efforts into making this into a really great feature for users, the iPhone 17 versus the Pixel 10, maybe the iPhone is going to seem a lot smarter and a lot more useful because it doesn't screw up nearly as often.
Let's see. Well, and by the way, we don't know what the judge is going to do. I think it would be kind of counterproductive to turn off those traffic acquisition payments because it would probably kill Mozilla, making Google's Chrome be even more dominant.
So
talk about
appreciable harm to multiple companies are harmed by that, and Google gets to keep its money. It's like a reward.
Saves Google
to Google.
$26 billion a year, and
hard
everybody
to see that
else
as a remedy, right?
And
hard to see it as a remedy.
Not a good.
I can't see it. I can't see anything happening until it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Like anyone being forced to do anything until then. So I think we're talking, again, 3 to 5 years, and Google, it may not be relevant by then. With the speed that things are working with.
I feel as though at some point there's going to be a negotiation. The government's going to get some stuff. Google's going to get some stuff. Maybe all Google will really have to do is allow other search engines and other products to have access to some of Google Search's secret sauce. Like maybe they don't have to crack open the entire search algorithm, but at least they will open up some of the metrics that they use to figure out what's good, what's bad, or like what seems to be AI generated, what seems not to be AI generated, what seems to be low value versus what is high value. That's the sort of thing that could be on the table that would allow Google to continue to live, thrive, and survive. Because the big problem is that it's not really shutting other people out. It's access to all of the data that Google gets by being the primary search engine for the iPhone. Again, they're not collecting personal information, but they're getting all of those search queries, and they are getting so much more sophisticated just by virtue of having access to that pipeline. And if that pipeline were to shut off, that wouldn't end Google search, but it would be a very, very big obstacle for them to get over.
In a nutshell, the reason for antitrust actions is the big get bigger based on their bigness. Yeah. And they're not punishing Google for being big. They're trying to prevent Google from using that bigness.
I think the problem is the government has, they fired off too many failures, too many failed shots at these legal. They got very aggressive in the last 4 years, and they fired off too many. And they failed too often, where companies don't really have a reason to negotiate. I think that they have a feeling like, we're probably going to win this one, and because they've been winning most of the time. And so I think the problem is when you take a lot of adventurous opinions and you have taken a lot of adventurous lawsuits, which is what the government's done in the last 4 years, and you lose a lot of them, it means that the companies that you're suing now go, maybe I can win. I have a pretty good job of and so you really gotta. This is kind of a aim twice and shoot once, or measure twice, and they're not doing that. They're just like, we're going to cut this board every place we can find it. And because they've lost so often, I think they've lost a lot of their ability to scare companies into settlements because they just don't. I don't think the companies, because I think there's a very low chance that this case could make it to the Supreme Court and actually win. In the current environment. So I think Google's going to look at it the same way, going, well, I think we can take this all the way out.
And the government's still very hot for this. The FTC, I don't think it's a coincidence that the FTC filed an amicus brief on another piece of bad news for Google that came out last year, where they lost an antitrust suit in California that I think were based on California's antitrust, and this was based on the Google Play Store, the Google's App Store. And so now we're moving into the next phase, which is if they've been ruled as in violation of antitrust, how do we correct this? So the FTC filed this 22-page amicus brief that is blistering. It is burn the buildings to the ground. down, send their kill all the
they
people.
have a lot of opinions,
throw
but I mean,
salt into the like all the again. This is like quote after quote of Supreme Court like cases, mostly from the 40s and 50s. So maybe it's not terribly relevant.
Matter.
Of that, of
not,
again,
not
the whole point. It's not good enough to simply punish them. The point is to make sure that they lose every single advantage they gain because of that action. And given that whether it goes through or not, I don't think it's going to be that bad. But the fact that anything that you do that conceivably can get you the death penalty will give you pause. Like,
yeah, I mean,
maybe you will like cop a plea to say, well, I will take 30 years for second degree murder. Please don't hang me on like Capital One, because that's going to be bad.
The problem is when we say the government, we should define this as one branch thinks that this is important. So the Congress is not doing anything.
The branch that are essentially the cops for enforcing all the laws that exist. So that's not a small branch of government.
Congress doesn't want to do anything about it because it's messy, and all the courts seem to be, you can make a little movement, but it's been petering out. And so I think that the problem is that it's, that's, and we have to, look at, I mean, there's a pretty good chance that the people that are there now will probably be there in next year. Yeah. But if they're not, it's over. Like all of this disappears, so there's a lot, it'll all just get buried, and so I think for most of these companies they're going to wait at least until November because, because it's still close. I mean, it's a much better chance now than it was before, but it's still, a toss up to what will happen in November. And then they don't have to think about it for another 4 years. Yeah.
Also, if you compare like the party on Monday, the DNC released their party platform for 2024. And as far as how it'll affect huge tech companies, they couldn't be more opposite. That it's not as the DNC's platform isn't quite as hostile as it was in 2020, but it's still the idea of we need to regulate, we need to rope in these powers of $2 trillion companies, whereas granted, the RNC's party platform is pretty much a whole bunch of truth social posts, but still, it's mostly like, we have no business restricting the economy. We have no business restricting big companies and punishing them for being great. And we're gonna roll. And the simple fact that the Biden administration was so hot about prosecuting this stuff is the reason why they might not be terribly interested. Although I'm just catching myself by reminding myself that the DOJ's antitrust action against Google search actually was started during the Trump administration.
Yeah, this is actually a nonpartisan issue, but for different reasons. And that's the funny thing about the whole thing. And that's why politics shouldn't have anything to do with this. And one of the reasons it should go through the courts.
Yeah, and I think it should.
Not politicians.
I think it definitely belongs in the courts. So I think that I think that in 3 to 5 years we'll know what it means.
Yeah, yeah. It's too bad.
And hopefully we'll still be here to talk about
Actually, it's a good thing. The courts don't move very quickly compared to the tech industry.
Yeah, and inevitably what that means is that by the time we get a final result, it won't matter.
It's meaningless. Yeah. Although I think you can make a strong argument that the AT&T breakup was effective, that the Microsoft action was effective. I think there are things that. Well, this is more of a philosophical discussion about what government should and shouldn't do.
But nonetheless, in the end, I think a lot of times what happens is the act of going through the process leads to change.
Right.
The final end result may not, like by the time we got to the moment about like Internet Explorer and Microsoft, it was sort of like almost irrelevant, but the chilling effect and the fact that Microsoft went through all of that, the fact that Google is going through that Apple may be going through it, like we've talked about it here, things that Apple has changed its policies, not because there's been a final judgment on them in Europe, yes, but not some of their worldwide policies, but because the walls are closing in. And I think that may be the biggest effect for something like that.
Chilling effect.
And the hilarious thing is the things that it doesn't affect, like AT&T is still massively affecting our ability to get internet. Like, because they don't get poll access, their poll access policies of dragging their feet. Those companies, the companies that used to be AT&T on that split up are still thwarting our ability to get internet. And so that hasn't, 50 years later, we're still, or 40 years later, we're still paying the price
ask
for that.
Dane Jasper of Sonic about that. He's, he would love to put Sonic fiber everywhere, but they won't let him on the polls. Yeah. Even though, honestly, I think the government requires them to, but they drag their feet.
I have a friend that owns an ISP not just Dane, but I have another friend that owns much smaller ISP, and I mean, it is just brutal. And the thing is that has, like, we can talk about all these antitrust cases and everything else, but the access to internet has a far bigger impact. Access to inexpensive, high-speed internet has a far bigger impact on the average person than Apple or Google or even Live Nation. And the fact that we're not taking this is the only antitrust we should really be focused on, and the fact that we're not is because they pay our politicians so much money, and so we just have to understand, like, the reason it's there is essentially corruption, and it's incredible, like, that is. Because I was driving through Arizona going, hey, this would be a really great place to live. If I wanted to, go, and Flagstaff is gorgeous. But the internet in Flagstaff is horribly constrained. And I was like, well, I can't move there. And it definitely affects communities, to not be able to have open access to the internet more than probably almost any other antitrust that we've seen go by.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah. And this is why it, on top of all of my thoughts about all these antitrust actions, even when I think it's appropriate to put some pressure on Apple and Google and Microsoft and all these other companies, it's like, the thing is, great. So now you're putting pressure on Google search, the product that everybody acknowledges is the best in its field, to the point of that there's almost no direct competition to it because it's so good. It's the one product everybody wants. And so the court is conceivably messing around with that, but they're not taking up they're just now getting around to doing something about Ticketmaster and Live Nation. And they're still not doing anything about how communications and broadband companies have lockdowns on how they provide services to communities or don't provide services to communities.
If you start cherry picking the things that they're not doing a good job of, you can go on and on and on. Later on Security Now, we're going to talk about what is probably the largest data breach of all time, possibly due to a data broker putting the passwords in the clear on a website in a zip file. I mean, and there's to this day no federal regulation against data brokers. The biggest privacy, forget cookie consent banners. What about data brokers? Let's get rid of them. Anyway, you can go on and on if you start doing that. It's kind of an endless supply of malfeasance in the world. Well, let's take a little break. You're doing the MacBreak weekly thing. Andy Anako, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell. We have settled on a date and time for the New York City meetup, by the way. I wanted to pass this along. Club Twit members already know this. I've been talking to Joe, who is in our Club Twit. He's a street photographer. He's offered very kindly to do a photo walk. So here's what we're going to do. On Saturday, September 7th, I will be in town. We're going on vacation, and that's the first stop. And we're going to meet up in Bryant Park. We decided we wanted to do it outdoors due to the rise in COVID, but also because then we don't have to get a bar to agree. And we'll start that at 3 p.m. in New York City, Saturday, September 7th. We'll meet up for a couple of hours. Then Joe's going to take us on a photo walk, and he has a wonderful itinerary. Let me just look at this because I put it up in the events on the Club Twit Discord. But by the way, you don't have to be a Club Twit member to do this. It's going to be so much fun. And since we're in Bryant Park, we could have millions of people show up. So we'll have lots of room for you. You don't have to go on the photo walk if you don't want to. There it is. Thank you. So we're going to walk to Grand Central. Great place. The sun will be slanting in through the windows. Should be a great time to take pictures at one of the most amazing railroad stations in the world. Then the Tudor City Overpass, the Chrysler Building in Midtown, Subway, if you wish, if you feel comfortable. I can't wait to Washington Square Park. That is a lot of fun to watch the buskers there and the students meet up. Then Doyers Street, some pictures of Bloody Angle in Chinatown. The Manhattan Bridge, take pictures of Lower Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge in Chinatown during the golden hour. And if there's time, we'll go to Cortlandt Street. So we can get some photos inside and outside the new Oculus, which is kind of a sight to be seen. So if you're in New York City or the East Coast, anywhere, September 7th, Saturday afternoon in the park, 3 p.m. at Bryant Park in New York City. Should be a lot of fun. On we go with the Vision Pro segment.
What do you see? What do you know? It's time to talk the Vision Pro.
There lyrics by Andy Anatko.
Another 18 cents in my pocket. Yes.
Every time we play it. There's actually only one statement, a story. I think it's was put in here by our resident Vision Pro guy, Jason Snell. Apple is apparently giving private demos showing off visionOS 2.0 with features that are not yet in the beta, and including some enterprise AR demos.
Yeah, that was actually me.
Thank you, Andy.
It was
wow.
A user on Twitter, an analyst, I think, basically just made a tweet. Oh yeah, Apple. I'm having a private meeting with Apple. They showed off some stuff that hasn't been showed off in the beta yet, and also a really nice demo of enterprise AR. But the other thing is he also showed off his Vision Pro cufflinks, which I thought no, don't bury the lead. Did you make those yourselves? Did you get those on Etsy? Are those commercially available?
Show them if you will. There you go. Very nice. Avi Greengart probably will never be invited to another Vision Pro. Oops, I pushed the wrong button. Now I'm in an inception. There we go. No. We'll never be invited to a Vision Pro demo again, right? I mean, you don't tweet about those things.
They'll invite them just if they bring them extra copies of those cufflinks. Those are.
It depends because they did this. So on sixcolors.com, not to promote that site again, but Dan Morin wrote a piece last week about it. They called him down and he visited there and he was able to write about it. It was perfectly fine. And was what they've been trying to do is reach out to people. Apple has a weird thing, right? Where visionOS 2, they talked about it at WWDC. There's a developer beta, but and they know people talk about the developer betas, but they also kind of pretend like they don't. It's very strange, right? And so what they did here is they did an event or a series of briefings, individual briefings with people where they walk through a bunch of stuff about what is on visionOS 2 in the developer beta and what is coming. And Dan got a big preview of it himself. So they're out there doing this. They're trying to spread the word about visionOS 2, but it's funny because you could also just get the developer beta and see most of this. Apple has its own strategies. Anyway, Dan got to spend some time.
So this is stuff that's available in the developer beta.
Yeah, well, some of it wasn't.
I think Haunted Chess. That's pretty cool.
I think some of it was new apps and other stuff enterprise. Enterprise focused applications where they want to show it. You got to give them credit. They are continuing to talk about Vision Pro and visionOS and get people, analysts, press, whatever, involved in the discussion about it. So it's not, radio silence or anything like that. But I did find it a little curious.
Did Dan get the Vision Pro cufflinks?
No, certainly not. And Dan doesn't have a Vision Pro, so it was also just a good excuse for Dan to spend time in the Vision Pro, so he knows about it more. Yeah. The Six Colors budget will cover one Vision Pro, but it will not cover two. Sorry.
Do you think in this journalistic economy that we can afford shirts with French cuffs to begin with? No,
that's a good point. You have to have French cuffs for this to even make sense.
Unless some guy died and they wound up at the Salvation Army store, I'm not wearing French cuffs.
Well, if you see Avi Greengart on the street, you pull him over and ask to see his cufflinks because those are sweet. I would wear those.
I really should message him and ask, where did you get this? Or someone must have asked him.
Yeah,
I only have French cufflinks for my.
Come on, you're wearing a work shirt. Don't give us that
for my dress shirts. If I have dress shirts,
dress shirts.
Okay. I don't like that. I don't. Anyway, it's a long story.
I have buttons on my cuffs like a real working class dude.
See this pin that once held a pile as big as your eye? Now look at me. I'm wearing a cardboard belt.
By the way,
once I had a...
Thank you.
For those of you who do have a Vision Pro, we will give you another excuse to put it on next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. We're going to do a live stream with the Verve Pipe at the record plant, and we're going to stream it. This time it'll have production audio, so we'll get that working. But the band's going to go through their entire Villains disc, which is what they recorded at the record plant, and answer questions and so on and so forth.
You will need the Stream Voodoo spatial app, right?
Yeah, so you want to go to streamvoodoo.com/spatial and make sure that we have you on the list, and we'll send you a link that you can go watch it. But sign up now for that. But that's streamvoodoo.com/spatial. And Not
And
special.
you could
Spatial.
sign up and they send it to you pretty quick. Mark
They do.
Marcello says he'll send it to me right away.
And you'll probably see we may do some other tests between now and then that we may make available to everyone to see what we're working on and everything else. But next Tuesday, it'll be the first time I think we've ever done anything, I don't think anybody's ever done anything like this. So we're going to see how it goes. So, we're pretty excited about it. So it should look pretty good in 3D. It's in the Studio B of the record plant. And so,
nice.
So it should be, and we have we'll be streaming to YouTube as well.
Studio. That's
we'll stream it to YouTube as well. But there'll be a stream there that's available for Apple Vision Pro, since we're talking about it.
And who's the band again?
It's the Verve Pipe. They were known for a song called Freshman. In the 90s, and as well as Photograph. Brian Van Dark is the lead singer, and he's done some stuff on his own. Colorful is another single that they had. Incredible band, and just couldn't be better guys. So really, really good band, and friends of mine. So it turned out, because they were playing in Mill Valley, they're playing at Sweetwater the next day. And so I noticed that I saw their schedule. I noticed there was a day between when they arrive and when they play. And I was like, hey, why don't we fill that day with more work? so they were open to it. So we're going to, so it should be a fun show. So stay tuned.
Good news. If you're in California, you can now, or soon, will be able to put your driver's license in your Apple and Google wallets, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. My driver's license is one of the few things that I have left that I actually need to carry with my phone, because I pay for almost everything with my phone. And it's
bad news. You still have to carry your driver's license.
Nab it.
California says they'll be authorized for use in TSA screening, select apps, select businesses such as Circle K, SFO, SJC, and LAX.
What about BevMo? BevMo.
I don't know.
That's the only reason I need my license on a day-to-day basis. Is like I need to go and.
They say you should still carry your driver's license because law enforcement, in fact, does not have a way to validate that. So I don't know how useful this all is. California has had a digital driver's license for some time.
So the idea here is that they're going to be an Apple Wallet. There are already, I think, 5 states participating in that.
Right.
And there are, I think the best way this will work is at the security line at certain airports. You'll be able to basically tap your phone
that's great.
and get that information. Although, it depends. Some different airports have different security requests as well. But yeah, that's the idea. And the idea is that in the long run, there will be a agreed upon system, and everybody will get on board, and you'll be able to tap your phone. You don't have to show them the screen. You get to choose what you share, so you don't have to share a lot of specific information with them. It's just sort of a verification of your identity, and you can choose to share your age and have that be verified if you're buying alcohol. And then that's the idea, but it's going to be a slow rollout because, again, you're talking about every single place where somebody might want to see an ID and all the technology that is or isn't present in those events. But still, California, their app is also very bad, but this is good in that you'll be able to just put it in the wallet. Although even then, my understanding is that there's a renewal period. So after a month or 3 months or something, you have to go back and
with the California license app, when I got a new phone, I had to redo the whole thing. It was a real pain.
Yeah. So it's a start, and we'll see where it goes. And it always felt, as Californians, I think the home of Silicon Valley, it felt kind of embarrassing that this state was that far behind on this. That Arizona's in there, but California is not. So take that, Arizona.
And this caveat from Axios. Californians who add a driver's license to their Apple or Google wallets must still carry their physical ID card as required by law.
Yeah. And also remember that all these digital license features that are going state to state to state, almost none of them require, they're built on the understanding that the officer who wants to check your license can check it without taking possession of your phone.
Yes.
So if you think that if an officer decides to be kind of clever and say, "Oh, we got your digital license. Just give me your phone. I'll check it. I have to go back to the car to check it." He asked permission for you to have your phone. You willingly gave it over, which means that they could do a dump if they want to. Just remember what your rights are.
They do take your driver's license.
Yeah, the whole idea is this is actually an NFC ID system.
Tap.
It's a tap to present information,
ID,
and that the interface is supposed to let you choose what you share with them. So it's actually, in some ways, it could potentially be more private, whereas you've got all that information on the front of your card. If all you're doing is doing an age verification at Bevmo, and they've got this system set up, which they don't right now, you could say, just share my age, tap. They don't get to see any of your other information on your card or your driver's license number or anything. And
of course, we're way behind, as Rolf's in our Discord, Club Twit Discord says. In Norway, we have a driver's license app. No need to bring the card anymore.
And we'll get there.
And Morup says same thing for Denmark.
So, you know the story here. It's absolutely true. I will say again, this is what I said when all the Europeans talked to me about contactless payments in the U.S. is the United States is enormous. It's enormous. And it's 50 states. So there is not a unified system for most stuff. It's the individual state governments. And unlike a very densely populated Europe, you have a lot of places that are out in the middle of nowhere where there's nobody, and then there's a gas station or something. And there are so many of those. So the sheer number of anything that you have to replace with a new technology is so enormous, and the political structure is so fractured because of the 50 states. It's very difficult. It's a much bigger problem. Not that it's an excuse, but I'm just saying all of these rollouts are exponentially harder in the US than they are in Europe. And so yes, every time I go to Europe, I'm like, wow, this is pretty awesome. But again, U.S.
And
has
by the way,
you're in North Dakota somewhere, you're up in the mountains in Colorado somewhere, and it's like there's nobody. There's like 10 people and a cow.
We have a state that's bigger than your whole country that has all the stuff you're asking for. So
yeah.
And by the way, that one gas station in between the Las Vegas, in the desert between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, is charging more than $8 a gallon for gas, because where else you gonna go? Right.
Yeah.
So
there's just the
America.
I think a lot of
market.
A lot of Europeans especially just don't understand the wide open empty spaces problem with America. They come to San Francisco and they're like, day trip to LA. I'm like, well, it's 6 hours that way, right?
Yeah.
So that is and with contactless payment, that was a huge problem. Is like the number of terminals you have to swap out to get it to work. And we've basically done it, but it takes real financial motivation, because also that gas station in the middle of nowhere doesn't want to spend $3,000 on new technology or the gas, so it's hard. It's a hard problem. I'm glad that they've started this. It's going to take forever, but they started.
Right after this, I hear
$8 a gallon in Europe. So they at least that's we have that in common. Cedro Cron in our YouTube chat says we can't even get people to use different passwords or password managers, and they're going to adopt digital driver's licenses. Good luck.
I think
this
is going to open the door to metric. I think that metric is next.
It's just the beginning, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't take that picture away from us, Alex. We're proud of it.
I tried to just switch to metric. I'm going to do everything in metric, like when I was like 19, and after about 2 years, I just gave up. I can't.
These metric wrenches, they don't fit nothing.
No, I just
Hey, I am informed that we neglected to play the Vision Pro closing theme, even though we in fact have run out of Vision Pro.
People didn't know that we were
That's
left.
Not so. Go ahead, hit the
Now
Vision
you
Pro.
see, now you know, we're done talking the Vision Pro.
We're done.
It said we're done immediately. It's like we're done.
We were done.
We're done.
Poor John
Jingles.
Ashley, just sitting with his finger hovering over the button. Is your finger a little sore now? Yeah. A big deal on iPads. This is good news. The 9th generation iPad is down to $199.
Nice.
On Amazon and Best Buy. I don't know if that heralds a new iPad coming any minute, or just, I don't know what. It's the lowest price, according to Apple Insider, they've ever seen on record.
Yeah, I actually had to remind myself. I said, well, at that price, let's just buy one and figure out if we need one later. No, let's not. That is one hell of a great price.
It's 64 gig storage and Wi-Fi only, but you know what? That's fine.
As a reader, and as a backseat device, that's more than plenty.
So this is being discontinued. Is that the reason for the price drop?
Yeah. I mean, there's already a 10th generation model, and the rumor has it that they'll do an 11th, and the 9th will get bumped off the bottom. So it's at the end. It's really already been replaced, but they still, classic Tim Cook, they're still offering the previous gen model at a cut rate price. And now, this is the last stop before it gets off the price list entirely.
This is the last active iPad, I think, that has that big forehead and that big chin from day one. So,
A home button.
Yeah.
Wow. Could it ever be the case that the home button would stop working?
Yeah, because only because like people use it while they're eating. Their
Oh,
hands
no.
are
I mean,
sticking,
like
rubbing-
that Apple would deprecate it in the software.
Well, no, they'll support it until
At
the
some
moment
point,
at
yeah.
which they're not supporting any of the home button devices anymore, which will be a while because they're still selling that one now. So
Right. That gives you a few years anyway. And if you use Apple Podcasts, I know a lot of people do. Good news. There's now a web version. I had no idea there wasn't. Wow. But they're catching up with Pocket Casts. So you can subscribe, you can listen. It works in Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and Safari in 170 countries. Great. Fantastic. Welcome to the 21st century.
Isn't it interesting that comes right on the heels of Apple Maps for web?
Yeah.
That it seems. I mean, it's.
Like-
it seems like something. You're right. You would have to be reminded that they haven't been doing that all along. I wonder if that points to something in the future that's going to benefit from having lots of web presence, or if they're just simply, as a matter of policy, acknowledging that here's how many people, how many of our users have an iPad but they have a Windows machine, or they have an iPhone but they have a Windows machine, or they have an Android phone and a MacBook, and allows anytime we can get an incursion into set our hooks into their hearts a little bit deeper, even if it's just on this one issue of podcasts. Why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah.
Maybe this didn't have the capability, the server power, their server resources to spend on something like that. But I don't know. Someone won an argument finally, I think, inside.
And I know there are some podcasts that say don't use Apple Podcasts, but Jason and I agree. There's nothing wrong with Apple Podcasts, and if they cancel the subscription because you haven't listened in a few weeks, fine, right?
yeah, I mean, it's a good app. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't have some. I use Overcast and not Apple Podcasts because I like some of the features in Overcast, but Apple Podcasts, it keeps getting better. And so now there's a web version, so that solves that problem if you're on your Windows PC at work or whatever, and you want to find that spot in your podcast. And yeah, in terms of their policy, it's kind of hard to say how dare they stop endlessly downloading episodes of a podcast that nobody's listening to. I mean, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but you understand that a large number of podcasts saw a drop of 20 or 30% in their in their downloads because of that, and they were understandably disappointed. But nobody was listening, so why were you counting?
It doesn't change the number of people who were actually listening, and it rewards the podcasts where the people are actually listening. And I mean, I get it. And I get that if you're banking on that number and then the number changes. I mean, this keeps happening in the podcasting industry, right?
It's
I mean,
normal.
we had the IAB rules came in and they keep changing the rules. And like what a podcast listen is very difficult to define. But I do think it's hard. Like I said, I get the pain of it. It's just hard to argue, like, how dare you not count the numbers of people who don't listen? I mean,
so you and I have integrity. We only want to count the people who listen. It's podcast numbers are very strange. I mean, we see shows go up 30% one week, down 30% another week. It's very all over the place, and I don't know why.
Well, that's why the best ads in podcasts are from advertisers who see the effect of the podcast, right?
Yes.
Because that's the truth of it is if you're an advertiser and you're buying a number, and this is what happens, ad agencies, they just are buying a number, they do that. But the truth is when you have a good relationship with an advertiser, they're like, oh, when we advertise on MacBreak Weekly, we get response. And it's like, that's what they're buying is the actual response, not a vague number that may or may not mean anything. But unfortunately, when you industrialize advertising, as we know that they've done with so much of the podcast industry, you get to the point where it is a number, and that's when you're like, yeah, maybe we could get that person who's not. I mean, technically, our file is on their iPhone, so maybe it counts.
We should count them. We should count them. We actually have agencies that buy shows by name only, and so they sometimes won't buy this show because they say, well, only Apple people listen to this show, and that's actually not the case at all. A lot of IT people who have decision-making responsibility in every arena.
Apple people means the iPhone, which is the most popular consumer product.
Yeah, right.
I do think that this is probably Apple saying we don't want to develop on Windows anymore. We're just going to keep on making web apps. Like we're just going to make some web. We're not
maybe
gonna
that's
do
it.
native.
Yeah. In fact, somebody in the YouTube chat says it's actually it was in Discord by Joe said we're not any competitive. We have web apps. What lock-in?
Well, but I think it also is just they're doing what a lot of other companies do, which is like, I don't want to build a native, like Apple has a native platform. They're going to build native things for that. Right. And then you have a web version, and
it's always the case the native version's better, right? I mean, that's what Facebook did with its first app.
Always.
People said, "Oh, that's not it. You need a native app."
It's always better.
But there's an in between where, my God, if you ever looked at the technically, there was a Safari for Windows, and technically there's music for this platform, but it's so badly done. It's not done with any sort of delicacy or primacy that if they were to say, I would be 100% in favor of Apple saying, well, we're obviously going to be putting our full creativity and our full efforts towards the iOS native app, but we are going to keep a web version of it as feature complete as we can, and we are going to keep updating it. That's kind of a win. Although it's still kind of weird. I haven't checked in a little bit to see if Apple Maps is working on phones yet. It was very, very weird when it launched. It didn't work on Android phones. It did work. It does work on Chrome. It's not a renderer problem, but that would indicate that they don't want. They feel as though they haven't properly transmogrified the web interface to look good on mobile yet, or there's a reason why they're holding off at least immediately. That's weird.
Also, speaking of the iPhone, the first Indian-made iPhone Pro models are coming this year for the first time ever. Oh, yeah, I said India. Did I say the word India? Yeah.
India.
For the
you did.
Important to say that. For the first time ever, Apple will be assembling, Foxconn will be assembling iPhone Pros in India. They've begun training thousands of workers in northern Tamil Nadu state as they rush to produce the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max as close to the global debut as possible. It might be a couple of weeks after the debut. That's important because of tariffs? Is that why they're doing that, or?
It's important because of tariffs of being able to sell in India. It's important because of they're wanting to have more diverse manufacturing.
Of course,
and it's also a really good, like, positive mark for Indian manufacturing, that they are not just doing low end stuff. That they are doing, like, here's the most expensive, most tricky, we have the platform we have had the least amount of experience in manufacturing, and you get to manufacture it just on the same level as anybody else.
All right. I think unless I've missed something, we've hit all of the highlights of this week's. Well, I didn't mention the new iPhone 16's coming in bronze, maybe.
Yeah, is it Zune Brown? I think best case scenario, it's Zune Brown. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, it's tan. Either way, not feeling great.
Called Desert Titanium.
Desert Titanium to go with all the other
titaniums.
That is
hideous.
Pulled out of
titanium.
That's definitely a pulled out of the riverbed after a year color.
Photos often don't do these things, colors especially, justice. But I'm given pause that they're replacing the dark blue, which is what I have, and I think is actually very nice, with something that could be best described as an earth tone. But
earth tones.
I have a long relationship that is very critical with Apple and whoever is choosing the colors over there. I always call that person the color czar. The color czar is, I don't know, they keep them locked up somewhere where they can't see the sun or the sky or maybe colors, and they say, hey, you know what pros want? Pros want dark phones that have no color. Yeah. And so why not a tan phone? Why? Yeah. Go ahead, Apple. Tan phone, sure, whatever. It'll go well with leather. Oh, wait, you don't sell leather accessories anymore? No!
Yeah. And I understand why you want to go for conservative colors, because those are the ones that sell best. Also, if I were buying a phone, I'd be concerned about resale. And if I want to be flashy and pink and super, super lime green, I would just buy a case and put it on there. But it is kind of cool when you see that the Google Pixels, not the Pixel 9, the pink, it is pink with a capital P. It is not halfway, and that's kind of. I really wish that they would have. Apple would decide every year we're going to have one colorway that is just so intense that it is going to be a choice to go for this colorway. And I would love to see that, because the choice of color would be something kind of amazing.
Yeah.
All I want is choice. I don't want Apple to say, look, if you want to buy an iPhone Pro, it comes in bright pink or bright green, and those are your only choices, right? I don't want that. There's always going to be black and white and gray.
But don't you put in a case, really? Let's be honest.
I mean, I don't.
You're caseless?
I'm caseless. I'm absolutely caseless.
You're raw dogging it. Wow.
You gotta, you gotta. I don't
Why
want
do you
case.
gotta?
I don't. I mean, I think it's a
You got
beautiful
to be in a minority,
object.
aren't you? I mean,
I'm just so clumsy. I could never. I can't remember. I probably drop my phone a couple times a week, and I look at it and go, "Wow, I'm glad I had a case."
Plus, with the case, you can vary your colors as you move.
My daughter,
Yes.
she was talking about her phone working, and then she showed me the case, and literally the entire back. She's got she's in a case.
Yeah.
The only thing that's holding that phone together is the
case.
Is the case. So.
I use, thanks to you, Alex, I got this is the Peak Design case, which I had. It's funny. I've gone through, I remember I was doing wallet cases for a while, but this, because the magnet is, in addition to the MagSafe, it's much stronger.
That's the whole thing for me, is that it
stick my wallet on that.
Do you use the little thing that goes into on your car? Well,
I don't need it on my car, but I have a variety of places that I thwack my phone to. So I really like this. And now I realize, because I have all the accessories, all I have to do is buy a new case when a new phone comes out, and then everything works. Because they're keeping this little hole kind of fits the
tripod. For the tripod mount, it works great. And then for the one on my car, it just it's got this weird little hook that goes into your vent, and then you can tighten it up, and it holds it to that vent really solidly. And it's both in my car and my wife's car, and man, it's great.
I'm going to have to pay attention as I walk around to see. But my sense is that almost everybody has a case.
Yeah, I rarely see a blank phone out there. And again, I think I take really good care of my phones, but it's the cases, and so that I can be totally irresponsible. It's for I had this phone for a month and a half, and I forget what the situation is, but I was putting my backpack back on, forgot that for whatever reason I had my phone in a top pocket of the backpack and it was unzipped. And because I swung my backpack off, it just went free.
Yeah.
And landed a certain distance on the sidewalk. And I'm like, well, 6 weeks. That was fun. A $1,200 phone. And it was perfectly fine. And I'm sure that would not have been the case if it were not in a case.
Well, and again, the very first thing I do is I put one of the glass things across the front. I put it in a case, and it just slowly wears out. But every year, because I hand my phones, down the family pipeline, I get to hand my wife a pristine last year's version.
That's another. That's a lesson. That's a lesson that I learned late. I have never, ever, ever, ever gotten a single scratch on any of my iPhones, any of my Android phones, until this one. I don't know what happened, but it was such a deep scratch that my fingernail can even get caught in it if I'm swiping. And that taught me that, okay, from now on, whenever we buy a new phone, we do not take it out of the store before putting a protector on the screen.
And by the way, if you buy the protector at the Apple store, they have a super cool machine that they use to put it on. It's way different than when you put it on at home. At home, it's a little stressful for me. The Apple one, you hand them the phone, you buy the screen protector, and they've got the it reminds me of the old credit card things when we were kids. It was like, it's like that, but it puts the screen on. It's great.
Cool.
By the way, speaking of India, according to the Rest of World, which is, by the way, a fantastic website for international coverage, Apple's biggest competition in India is Apple. Used iPhones. We give them the same phone in the same brand new condition, says one seller.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because one of the reasons why Apple has interest in India for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they haven't sold a lot of iPhones there yet, and if they're going to continue to make bank, if the iPhone is going to continue to be worth half of their business, they're going to find people who haven't bought iPhones yet and sell them iPhones. That's necessary. And also, as an economist explained to me, a lot of the middle class revolution that happened in China 10 or 15 years ago is starting to happen in India. So Apple has the expectation that there are going to be a lot more consumers who can afford a budget or economy phone. Unfortunately, right now, that's still the primary market. It's still a new iPhone is still kind of an aspirational object. And so that's why Apple's doing almost negligible numbers against almost any Android manufacturer who can give them a decent, like very, very cheap phone that almost anybody can buy. And because apparently there are regulations against importing secondhand iPhones for the secondhand market into India. Essentially, it means that once an iPhone gets in there, it becomes a very, very hot commodity as a way to get a budget version of an iPhone. So yeah, it's very, very price sensitive, and it's something that Apple's going to have to be chipping against if they want to continue to make headway there.
Finally, I forgot to mention the big rumor of the week. Yes. Apple's HomePod with a little robotic arm to steer it.
Hi, I'm Jibo, only not quite so friendly.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Jibo. Yeah,
maybe you look like the G4 iMac a little bit. Yeah, it's like an iPad-sized screen on an arm with a HomePod base that apparently Mark Gurman says is being, if not put into production, put into active design that they're going to do this thing. And he keeps calling it a robot, which is very silly.
Yeah.
But
because Amazon makes an Alexa that does exactly this. It turns to face you.
Yeah.
It follows you around if you're on a call.
Yeah.
But they do it without an arm.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that they want to pivot, or maybe they don't rotate the base, but they rotate the arm. I don't know. What troubles me about this report is that Mark Gurman is saying that they think that it might cost $1,000, and I have that HomePod or Vision Pro vibe, which is, guys, I know you can make the most ultra premium version of this product and put it in the kitchen. What if you made? It's okay, it's okay to just. I had an Echo Show. I have a Google Nest Home. Let me tell you. The opportunity for Apple to ship something that's basically like those, but vastly better is there. It is not a high bar to clear. And it would be a shame if instead of making a product that's like those, but better and uses Apple's ecosystem, which they've got all the pieces already, that they would instead be, but what if we built a robot arm and it was $1,000 and it blew everybody's minds? It's like, well, that's great, but who's going to buy that versus a 500 or 700 or whatever the price is? Maybe lower your expectations a little. Because like I said, I think as an aficionado of these kind of products, I think the bar is real low. I think Amazon is full of junk because they're trying to sell you stuff, and the Google stuff, Google's really inattentive, and those products are really slow and they don't get updated very often. Apple could slide on in there, and I hope they don't blow it by aspiring to build a ridiculous product.
That's Bang & Olufsen style stuff where, they're beautiful static objects. You go into the store and you admire it, but it's just a normal thing with this design quirk in it that makes it look cool and makes it cost 4 times as much. I'm glad I stopped in the mall to take a look at it, but there's no reason to buy it. It's just a fribble. It could be the only way. I was thinking about this, about how this could be an interesting thing to do. To make a screen that's motorized and so it can swivel and pivot and aim itself. Obviously, that's for all the demo videos will be. Oh no! Look! Hey, look! My granddaughter is walking around the room during our FaceTime call, but I can still see her because it's tracking her.
The Facebook already did this, Andy. That's the Facebook portal, and it was for Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah. But I'm saying that's the obvious video. But the other thing to do is to say, well, how about we do? Apple has an amazingly high respected reputation for privacy and security. What if there were a home security product that was operated by the one brand that you might trust it to have unlimited camera access to a room of your house? Not only that, but unlimited power to process that with AI and remember what it's seen. So I'm not talking about, hey, there's somebody in your house and they seem to be a burglar. Woo. I'm talking about the ability to ask, hey, Shlomo, did my dog eat today? Say, yes, your dog ate. What time? They ate a full bowl at 3:12 p.m. and then again at 4:12. And it knows that only because it knows that there's a dog in a room. It was tracking it when it went in. It knows what a dog dish looks like. It knows what a dog eating out of that dish looks like. So even though you didn't have to set up a shortcut to do so, you can ask it relevant questions like, is it cloudy at home?
We had an
because it has
advertiser
access to the
that
windows,
made a device like this, and it went out of business. It didn't sell. I have the device, kind of orphaned device in my collection. I don't know if it's the privacy angle or just the creepy angle. I don't know if it were suddenly
I think it's the privacy angle. I mean, I think that's what really hammered
really?
I think it really hammered the portal. The portal had a lot of advantages. I
didn't want a Meta device. I agree.
Oh, 100%.
Right, but it was a really...
even if it's Apple, I have... Ubiquity has cameras, and they don't ever leave the house. The internet, they're never stored anywhere except in my own server. But even then, I think people don't like the idea of cameras in the house. I think.
But I think I'm pretty sensitive. Like I have to admit, I don't have the Amazon or Google stuff in my house, but I do have the HomePod, the original one in my kitchen, and it's used all day, every day. But I don't feel comfortable with other devices in my Would you have
a device that had a camera on it in your house?
In the kitchen, I think I could do it. Kitchen? I mean, in the kitchen, yeah.
You would.
Yeah, and I think I do it because if I got one for my wife and my mom or my mother-in-law, her mother, they would probably use it 2 or 3 hours a day. I mean, they talk a lot, and so the problem for me is that I don't really want to think about for me, I wouldn't use it as much because when I'm in the kitchen, I kind of don't want people to be watching me cut vegetables or while I'm talking on the phone. And, it's not like, I don't know if I really want that, but I do think the swivel makes a difference. I think one of the problems with the portal or with any of these, the idea that you could do a 4K and then do a 720 punch in and move around. The problem is there's just a lot of places you get off axis. You can't get there, and so being able to move around and look at what people are doing in a larger room makes a big difference. And I think for telepresence, it could make a difference where, you could do things like put it in a conference room. It's not just kitchens, but it's put in a conference room and it looks at the person who's, doing it. And there are cameras out there that do that right now, but it might be nice to just be able to pop your iPad up and do it as well for something that's smaller. So I think I do think that $1,000 is pretty rich. I don't think even I would probably buy it. But at, $500 or $600, I think it starts to get into a range where you get a larger market.
Yeah, that's why I find it interesting. If I definitely not trust Facebook, might trust Google only in the sense that again, it's not that I necessarily think they're a hell of a lot more trustworthy than any other company that collects data of its scale. It's just that I'm already kind of all in on Google, so. In for a penny, in for a pound.
I think they already know everything about you, Andy. Yeah, so might as well give them video.
Yeah. But that's why I find it interesting to think of. Well, what if Apple's the one company I think could make that case that look, we're not going to start off by we're going to start off by showing you the big reveal. It's in shadow and then it's in spotlight and then it's rotating. But before we get into features, we're going to explain to you exactly how impossible it is for anybody, including Apple, to be spying on you or to be collecting information about you, that the AI that is trained, the things that the AI learns is kept on device. It's in a secure enclave. It cannot be accessed by anybody else. If that would be kind of interesting, but I think you're right. Like not for $1,000, for like $500 or $600, maybe.
Stephen Riddell, watching us on X.com, says, I feel like Apple is just a lifestyle brand. People like to promulgate this notion that Apple's pro-consumer with their focus on privacy, but Louis Rossman has been pointing out for 10 years they don't care about you. Louis Rossman, of course, is the right to repair guy. Oppose any attempt to improve rights and value to customers. Your privacy matters only as far as it's part of their marketing design language and would be dropped as soon as it's financially advantageous to do so. This is the contrarian point.
Well, I can I just quickly agree with what you're saying there, because they're not. Their principle is to. They have
the principle is to make money.
Their principle is that they have a business plan, and every single moral choice they make is applied against. Does this mess with our business plan, or does this not? It doesn't. Great. We'll put on the halo. We'll be the champions for this.
Is one of the things that's really changed is AI, and it is a rapacious maw of data that is swallowing everything it possibly can. And if Apple's going to do AI, which it obviously wants to, your data is absolutely going to be grist for the mill.
You actually don't know. We don't actually know that.
No, and that's not
I think
at all what
Apple's
their
whole
strategy
point.
is.
Their whole point is that your information is not like they can't
you're
even
very
see
trusting. That's all I could say.
No,
it's their
I'd
business
say
model.
there's nuance there that commenter is not sharing. Apple is not a charity. Apple is a publicly held company that's trying to make as much profit as possible, and that's true. But when you say, but they don't actually have any standards or priorities, I think that's also BS, and it's a typical argument that I've always heard about Apple. And the fact is, yes, Apple does things that are self-serving. However, Apple leans into things that its business model allows it to lead into that also differentiate it from some of its competitors. And at this point, the respecting people's data, because they didn't build their business on advertising and sharing data like Google did. Did they do that because it was the right thing to do? Well, no, they did it because they were a hardware company that also bundled software. But here we are, right? And so it is a trait of Apple. Apple's not a person. So, does it believe it or not? Is it a profit-seeking company? It absolutely is. But I think it is a trait and a strategy of Apple to go in this direction. And, you can say, yeah, but look at Right to Repair. It's like, yes, it is a big, complicated, profit-making company. And there are places where it emphasizes, and there are places where it doesn't. It also tries to take 30% from Patreon creators. I mean, it's complicated, is what I'm saying. It's complicated.
And I don't think that I really don't think Right to Repair is really connected to profit as much as it is Apple wants to innovate and doesn't want to have to deal with backwards compatibility or deal with anything we don't want to build things that we have to take apart. I think Apple doesn't, it's not about we're making a bunch of money on these parts. That's not the deal. I think that Apple just doesn't want to deal with that. They don't want that part of one of the variables that they're figuring out. They just want to make the best phone they can make. I mean, when you talk to folks at Apple a lot of times, you just get this thing. They just want to make what they want to make, and they want to make it as good as they can possibly make it, and they don't want to be encumbered. But I think that as far as the privacy thing, sure, maybe they drop it if it wasn't profitable, but it's always going to be profitable because no one else can do it. No one else can do what Apple's doing because they're vertically integrated, and as long as so privacy is going to be profitable for Apple and is going to be a differentiator for as long as the company probably exists, and so because that vertical integration is extremely difficult to reproduce with a heterogeneous mix of companies and technologies, and so I'm not saying that they're a good company or bad company, or that what's good or bad. It is a profitable thing to do, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think they're going to keep doubling down on it because it's the thing that makes them different, or one of the things that makes them very different from everybody else.
Let's take a break. When we come back, your picks of the week, my fellow Macker Breakers. Our show today brought to you by our fabulous Club Twit members. You've heard me plug Club Twit many, many times. And I hope that you've listened, you've heeded the call and joined the club. But if you haven't, we would love to have you. It's $7 a month. We really try hard to keep the price low. Although I do lately hear people say, okay, can we give you more? And yes, you can. I should say not give you more because it doesn't go into my pocket. I want to really emphasize this. Lisa and I don't take money out of the club. The club goes to support the operation, the salaries of the 10, 15 people who work here, the 20 or 30 contributors who join the shows every week. That's where the money goes. And if you like what you're hearing and if you want to hear more of it, the best way to do that is to vote with your pocketbook and go to twit.tv/ClubTwit. You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You get access to the Club Twit Discord. You get special events, not just on the air, but also in person. You get a lot of benefits. But the biggest benefit is you're supporting our efforts going forward. Advertising sales have really dwindled. And we need to make it up somehow. We've done our part. We closed the studio. That's going to save us a huge amount of money. But we need your support to keep going. Twit.tv/ClubTwit. That's all. I'm not going to go on and on. I don't want to beg. Let us get our picks of the week. I'm going to start it off because I saw an article about this and I thought this was very cool. Before there was Tech TV, before there was Computer Chronicles, there was a Southern California radio show from 1983 through early 86 called The Famous Computer Cafe. They recorded all their shows on reel-to-reel tape, many of which have been lost. But interestingly, a computer archivist named Kay Savitz bought a bunch of the reel-to-reels at auction and has digitized them and put them on the Internet Archive. So this is a time capsule from the earliest days of computing. The very first one I listened to was an interview with Bill Atkinson in 1985. 1 year after the Macintosh's release. Bill Gates is on here. He's less than 30. Douglas Adams. Many of the people that we know and love, Larry Magid is on here. Stephen Levy is on here. There are 2 interviews with Timothy Leary. This is a really fun time capsule. There's another one with Bill Atkinson later. So if you want to check it out, it's all available now. The ones that exist. I mean, there are many more shows than this. Unfortunately, many of them I think are going to be lost. But thanks to Kay Savitz, who saved these and has posted them. There's a Gene Roddenberry interview. Internet Archive. Search for Famous Computer Cafe. If you love this stuff, it's fun to hear the old commercials too for Microsoft Office and things like that. You can type, or you can use a mouse with Microsoft Word. Andy Anatko, pick of the week.
My pick is a podcast and a couple of episodes of that podcast. There's a podcast called 20,000 Hertz, which I did not know about until a couple of weeks ago. It is a 200 episodes so far. It's just a podcast about sounds. Not like music, not like music production, just like sounds. Like they'll do an episode about whale sounds, okay, and how those are generated, how they propagate. And the last 2 episodes, they did a 2-parter on the sounds of Apple, where they got access to the Apple sound design team and the Apple design team to have them walk them through like how Apple incorporates sound into products both today and historically, and the specifics about like what the purposes and the stories behind some of these specific sounds are. Like in episode 1, the one that really hooked me, they talked about the chime for the first Apple Watch. That like they want to make sure first there was like the beard stroking question of, well, like a wristwatch that produces like a chime, like what did old watches do? Should it be like more like a modern digital watch? And they take you through this pathway where they go from the design studio, they get a handful of like empty aluminum cases, and they're wrapping them with mallets to figure out, do they resonate? And that's how they came up with like the chime sound. And because this is a podcast you're listening to about sounds, it is so well cut together, because when they talk about like developing like the tritone sound that was, I think, originally for Sound Jam, which became iTunes. Like when you finish burning a CD, and they wound up using this noise like elsewhere, like in the modern OS, you get to hear the different iterations they went through. Leo, you'll enjoy this.
I can't wait to listen.
Because they had one of the engineers who said, well, I wrote this program in Lisp that would just generate sets of tones. And then just listen to these sets of tones over and over again through MIDI.
Wow. 2 episodes. That's great.
It's really great stuff. And the whole podcast is great. It's like now we were talking about like we should a podcast catcher does you a blessing when it deletes episodes that are old that you haven't listened to. Like this is now like, oh man, now we've got I need another 8 hours every day. Because
so these are sound guys? I mean, it's all about sound, right?
It's all about sound and it's esoteric stuff.
Top five podcasts that I listen to is
this is
20,000 Hertz.
It's just so entertaining to listen to. Yeah.
They did a whole episode on the sound that TikTok makes when the video stops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like at the end, like that little
boom bling.
And they made thousands of them, like thousands of that to get it just right. And they did all this stuff. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's a really, really great podcast. I 100% agree.
Wow, I had never heard of it. I'm thrilled to find out at 20k.org, 20k.org. It's a podcast all about sound. Wish I'd thought of that. What a brilliant idea.
Super deep.
Dallas Taylor, very nice. Thank you, Andy, for that recommendation. All right, how about you, Alex Lindsay? What do you got?
So, constantly working on my diet, trying to figure out what I want to eat and everything else. And I'm slowly winding out a lot of things like meat. so not completely, but just like, I probably can, but trying to figure out what to make and how to make it and everything else. And so I was talking to my cousin who's vegan, I'm not committed to being vegan, but I am. But I was like, oh, I just need to know more about what I can do there. And so he was like, he showed me this library that he has to make the food that he makes. But he said, you just need this one app and then it'll all go away. Like, just this thing. It's called Deliciously Ella. And this is an app. And I think even if you're not interested in vegan food, it's just so well made. So if you look at this, you have the recipes, but those recipes can be built into very quickly converted into shopping lists. They can be converted in, that you can keep track of, it's really well laid out.
This is great. I'm going to recommend this to Lisa. She and I both want to go more plant-based. This is great.
And I was really
is
like,
Ella a person? Is that Ella?
I think that's Ella.
Oh, okay.
I don't know though. But
it doesn't really matter. I guess.
All I know is that my cousin, who's been vegan for 8 years or whatever, was like, I have all these books, but this is the only app that I'm using to figure this out. They just come out with stuff, and you just follow the instructions, and it comes out great, and you don't have to think about it. And so, but I think it's even again beyond the. I started going. One of our members of Office Hours, Hasmukh Gajar, his wife Damayanti has a book on vegetarian cooking, and that's what really got me thinking about it. I realized all these spices and everything else. I don't really know how much I need meat to do a lot of these things, and so it started me down this path of this thing. And now I'm using this. I'm starting to use this app. And again, the hardest part with any of these things, whether it's this or cooking well or doing anything else. And I think that, cooking food from scratch is a skill that is a pretty important one, to have, and I think that it's, knowing how to, whether it's all vegetarian or whatever it is, you got to stop eating the ultra processed foods. Like I have to, like I've given up, I've been slowly winding out.
Because no matter, even however good it is not as good for you.
I was talking to a nutritionist about it, and I said, so what's the good ultra processed versus the bad ultra processed? They're like, it's all candy bars. Just look at it. When you see a box that you can make quickly, it's just a candy bar. Like it's, it has the same effect on your body as a candy bar. Like just think of them as all candy bars, and then you're much closer to the truth. And the other thing that I found is that, you're paying, a lot of, when you buy something, most of what you're paying for and most of what you're eating is logistics. You're eating what it took to get there, not, and how long it will last and how long it will last and how long and what it'll do and everything else. You're not really paying for the food, and so over the last couple of years, I've really spent a lot of time getting better. I mean, during COVID, but even after COVID, more intensely, going to farmers markets and getting all this stuff, but learning how to cook it all has been another challenge. And I've been leaning, this is adding to what I generally use as ChatGPT for it. So the mixture of Deliciously Ella feels a little more curated than ChatGPT. And a lot of stuff is, really, anyway, it's a really great app. And again, the management of like you saying, yeah, I want to do this, and you can check off all the things you don't have, and immediately makes a list and orders it in the way that it's probably going to show up in the supermarket. Then you can very quickly go through things and buy the things that you need. It's great. So, and really well designed. I hope more people do more.
It says it has in-app purchases.
Yeah, it's like a yearly subscription. I think it costs like $30 or something like that for the year, and I paid for it. So I looked at it
right now.
Yeah, I was like, so.
No, that's perfect.
All I can say is my cousin, my uncle, lost like 80 pounds in a year on this diet.
Nice.
So and it's not, doesn't feel like it's not a diet. It's just eating well. So
standard member $6.99 a month, premium member $32.99 a year.
So if you're a standard member,
cheaper to be a premium member.
Exactly. No, it's way cheaper. It's like you pay. I was like, that's a pretty good business model. Like, hey, if you don't want to pay, you only pay every month. We're not going to give you everything, and we're also going to charge you a lot more for time. Yeah. So, but I think that it's
that's less than a cookbook. I mean, I buy cookbooks all the time.
Exactly. I have a 1,000
recipes is less than a cookbook. So there you go. Thank you, Alex. I guess that only leaves you, Jason Snell, for your pick of the week.
All right, we heard about vegetarian things. Now it's back to the meat and potatoes. Hey, you should back up your Mac. How about that?
Yes, good thinking.
And Time Machine is nice. Time Machine is nice. Backblaze or some other remote backup is also good. A good idea, because local backup doesn't save you in case of a physical disaster like your house burning down or a flood. However, one of the things that I've really taken to lately, I do those things, but what I also did is I bought an SSD, a Samsung SSD, the size of my internal drive on my Mac Studio, plugged it in the back. My Mac Studio is under my desk, so it's actually tucked in right by the Mac Studio. I never even see this drive. And I clone it every day. And there are two great Mac apps that do it. I'm going to mention one that I think is maybe less known these days, Pocket, which is the other one.
Yes.
But this one, just as good, just came up with an update. I use them both. I like them both. Carbon Copy Cloner by Bombich Software. Mike Bombich has been making this app for a zillion years. It uses APFS and versioning within APFS, Apple's file system, to make it easier to capture different snapshots of your drive at different times.
Oh,
yes, it does.
that's a really good
thing. So we'll
thing.
snapshot your drive through time, as long as there's space on the drive. But what I do is I run it every day. It runs in the background. I never even notice. And what happens is then you have that day where you do an OS update, files disappear, or you do a migration and your files disappear. This happened to me. And guess what? I have my clone. It's literally all the files from my drive on another drive. And it's fairly straightforward to migrate back from that clone. It's also good because you've also just got a clone of your drive. I've had those moments where I thought, I need to copy these 8,000 files to another computer. I can just take the clone, which is all the files on my drive, attach it to the other computer, drag those files over, and copy it at USB speed instead of network speed, SneakerNet. So it's a great, it is not the same as a backup, but it is a backup and it's a safety net. And the utilities have gotten, it's not like the old days where a clone only had whatever was today. And if something changed today that was bad and then the clone ran, the bad thing happened on your clone as well. Now with APFS and versioning, you get I think they call it safety net, which is as much as your space allows on the drive. So I highly recommend using a tool like one of these, buying an SSD, attaching it to your Mac, backing up every day, every 2 days, using this as well as other approaches because you can't have enough. And I found it incredibly useful. So Carbon Copy Cloner 7 is just out in like a couple months ago and is very nice from Bombich Software. So recommended.
I'm sure I have a license, but I'm just going to send him another $50 because it's such a great program. And like you, I've been using Second Copy from Shirt Pocket Software. But one of the great things about a copy on write file system like APFS is the snapshot feature. And a good use of snapshots can save your keister. I use it on Linux as well. Not this program, but I use a Linux COW file system. Yeah. It makes a big difference. It's really nice.
And cloning is such a big such a big relief because let's say that suddenly your MacBook doesn't boot at all. Like, okay, worst case is like, well, this is the worst possible time because I've got something due in 2 hours and it's going to cost us $8,000 if I don't do this. Okay, well, just boot off of your clone and you're back up and running without anything whatsoever. Yeah. So that's part of any nutritious backup breakfast, having an actual bootable clone like within inches of your machine. That's not the only backup you should have. You obviously need to have stuff offsite and on different media, but yeah, that's part of a good breakfast.
Good pick, classic, if I might say so.
Meat and potatoes, like I said.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think you misspoke. It's Super Duper by Shirt Pocket Software.
Yeah, Super Duper.
What did I say?
Wonderful
Second
Dave
Copy?
Nanian. That's the one that I use for cloning like this.
Yeah. Second Copy is my Windows
version. They're both really good.
Yeah.
They've been around. They go back and forth with updates. I think Carbon Copy Cloner is newer now, but that means that Shirt Pocket is going to be coming out with a Super Duper. Like they just go back and forth. They're both great. They both do a little bit different things. They're both great. Use one.
My sense, I might be wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's a front end to rsync. Is that true or no?
I think there's a lot going on. I think that may be part of it, but I think that there's a lot going on there, especially since they're using APFS snapshots.
Yeah.
And then there are things you can do. Obviously, there are those power user features where you can say, don't clone this.
Right.
Run this script when you're done. They've got all of that kind of stuff built in there too.
Mike Bombich from Bombich Software.
Doing it for ages.
I love it. Thank you very much, Jason Snell, sixcolors.com/Jason. If you're curious what he's up to, there's a whole page devoted to that.
That's right.
Anything in particular? You want to highlight your show about all the Olympic gold medalists or something like that?
I would say the absurd D&D stylings of my very first D&D group, and we are still playing. It's the Eglath's Angels campaign at Total Party Kill. It's theincomparable.com. Total Party Kill is our actual Play D&D podcast. And that group in particular, new episodes are rolling out right now. That group in particular, a high amount of chaos energy. It's fun. We make trouble. And we
so
anger
you
our
have
DM.
simplified your JSON page now. You've kind of collapsed it. So is this on the Incomparable Mothership?
Yeah. No, the
Okay.
Incomparable Mothership is the main podcast on the Incomparable Network because there's
So
both things, right? So
confused.
Total Party Kill is the name, and it's in there somewhere.
No, it's not.
Theincomparable.com/TPK. Check it out.
Okay. But you see this, the Jason, I'm showing the Jason page. You
Yeah,
used to
I
have
see it.
every podcast. Now
Well,
you just have,
I tried to slim it down because it was too much.
no, it wasn't. It was great.
It's just
it was
too
an
much.
inspiration.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put Total Party Kill back on there.
No, you don't have to. Just go to theincomparable.com, right?
Yeah. You can do it.
And you can see why it's
do
like
that.
he's collapsed the outline.
Or just, well, I mean, if you want to listen to the podcast that we do about Magnum PI, you can do that too. It's the least consequential podcast I do, but it's fun.
Weekend at Kelter's. Summon Greater Landscaper.
Yeah, we were very silly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we ruin our DM's life in that podcast. It's great.
So fun. So fun. If you ever have a hole at your table,
All right, special guest.
special guest,
We'll do it.
I'll be a necromancer.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Thank
Be
you,
hard.
Jason.
We figured it out.
Andy and Akko, GBH, Boston.
Yep. It was just on Thursday. You can go to wgbhnews.org to listen to all that. I'm next on, I think, a week from Thursday at 12:30. Again, wgbhnews.org.
Nice. Wonderful having you, Andrew.
It's a
And of
treat
course.
from me.
OfficeHours.global is the home for the one and only Alex Lindsay.
Sure announced the new mic today, and we'll be talking about it with Shure tomorrow.
Is it a Motive? Is it one of the MV series?
It is it's like the SM4, I think they call it. It's brand new. I think it went out today. The announcement went out today. The SM, let's see here if I can find it here. SM4. It's $200 podcast mic, and so we'll have Sure on tomorrow to talk a little bit about
Laura
what's
Davis will be
different.
joining you.
And she's
that's
great.
Davidson, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That'll
Davidson,
be great.
yeah.
Yes.
She's really good. So if you're interested in mics, we're a little obsessive with mics. A lot of us have way more than we need. But this one, I'm always looking for a mic that's going to be, an inexpensive one that I can send out to people.
I'm not a fan of the mic you use. I'll be honest with you. There's no high end on it.
It's interesting that you're not getting that. I
asked you a couple of weeks ago, are you doing processing? And you said no. And I thought, well,
I don't do any processing.
something's
I don't-
squishing you.
Let's try
You
it.
sound like you're in a shoe.
Well, let me. Does it sound any better now?
Well, you got to
Sounds
say
quieter.
something.
Okay, I'm talking right now. Does it sound any better now? 'Cause
No, I don't
hear
know
a
what's
high end.
wrong.
Just-
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. What kind of microphone is that?
Oh, this is a Neumann TLM.
Yeah,
102.
see, that's the thing. It's a $1,000 microphone, folks. So it's got to be better than our cheap $350 Heil PR40s. And he's using a Shure SM7B, the USB mic. I think that sounds good too.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds pretty
just
good on our
sounds muddy.
podcast, so I'm not sure exactly on
Maybe
our
Muddy's
office hours.
better. Maybe if you're Celine Dion, they want Muddy. Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't get it. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jason. Thanks to all of you, especially our Club Twit members, for watching and listening. We stream now everywhere. We start in the Club Twit Discord, but we're also on youtube.com/twit, twitch.tv/twit. We're on Kick, LinkedIn, x.com, Facebook. And I'm sure I left something out, but we're everywhere. 7 different streams. So, no, I'm not. Somebody said, are you serious? You're going back to the studio? Did I say I was going back to the studio? If I went back there, it looks like a nuclear bomb hit it. I'm not going back to the studio. There's nothing left. I'm staying right here, my friends. Every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. You can watch on those streams live. But I beg of you, please get a copy, subscribe in your favorite podcast player, and download and listen that way, because that way we can't really count the live streams. So our audience numbers would be better if you would just subscribe and listen. Remember, you got to do both. You can also watch it on YouTube. You can even watch it on our website, twit.tv/MBW. But however you consume MacBreak Weekly, we're just very glad that you do. Unfortunately, now I must say, as I have now for so many episodes, it's time to get back to work because break time is over. Bye-bye.